All right, we are on. Okay. Let's wait for that airplane to go over.
Well done for Gas for not messing up the moment of silence this time.
Yeah, so basically, every time we've been doing our moment of silence, I've been doing something that's noisy. So I watched back some of the video, and then there's Ben and Neil like in the background, and they're like, oh, this Irk with his noise in the moment of silence. All right, so welcome for our live audience. It's so nice to have so many people here again. Like from the first one, we also had a big crowd like this. Second one's amazing. I'm so glad that so many of you guys turned out. We have a very exciting podcast today. I'm very excited for it because I haven't seen Gizzy for a long time. So for me, it's quite nice to see a friend again. And it's actually better than Ben, to
Way
be honest.
better.
Way better.
A little bit prettier.
A little bit, no.
Just a little bit.
Listen, I asked him please to have the top knot bun things going, so I don't know if you passed the message on, but you do look good. Like the
Thanks,
top knot
no.
bun would have been better, but
He didn't pass on the message, unfortunately. So I've got the low bun going.
that's fine.
But,
That's fine.
sorry
Maybe
about
we'll
that.
shoot the next one with a nice tied up low bun with him, just to match up a little bit. All right, so let's get down to business. So we are going to be doing a ladies talk. So it's going to be the Be Nice Girls version, and I think if this goes quite well, I think we can just do another one and just dig into similar or like the similar topics, and we can dig into those topics for ladies specifically only. So we'll just take out the men's side of it and then dig deeper into those little topics. So I think hit us off with just who you are and how you fit into the picture, just so that our audience can see how you fit in and how long we've maybe known you or how long we've been friends, and maybe how long you've known, sadly, Ben for, and how that dynamic works. You guys both been doctors, just to give guys a little bit of a feel. And then, let's tuck into the women's things that you want. So hit us up, Giz.
The juicy stuff. Cool. Thank you. My name is Gisela. Some of you might recognize me from back in the day. I used to be a member of Fitbox, and we're only not members because we live so damn far. I think I met you in 2015, somewhere mid-year 2015 is when I joined the box initially. I originally come from Johannesburg, and I moved down to essentially study medicine at the University of Stellenbosch. Finished my training at Tygerberg, worked for the military for 3 years, which I don't recommend for anyone. And pretty much how I would fit into the picture is health and fitness has been quite an important thing for me for more than 10 years. As a young teenager, I was diagnosed with some hectic digestive issues at a time when things like no one knew what gluten was. You know, gluten-free wasn't really something that was easily available. And I kind of took it upon myself to go on this journey of finding how to eat and how to live in a way that was better for the stuff that I was going through, essentially. Initially, I was going to study dietetics, and then somehow I ended up rather studying medicine. But the idea of health and wellness and that sort of being a really important part of my life has stuck with me since then. As a sort of personal journey, I've been through many different trial and errors. I've done every single form of fasting that exists, and all of the diets that go around with that, the ketos and the low carbs, well, the banting, I suppose, that goes along with it. But through all of that, discovered quite a lot of incredible science, but also incredible gaps in science when it comes to women. Unfortunately, there's a historical and therefore enduring gender gap when it comes to research into women's health specifically. I think back in the day, it was just plain and simple oppression, but as sort of science became more advanced, people started excluding women from studies because they thought that progesterone and estrogen, the fact that we have periods, would be a variable that they can't control in studies. So a lot of pharmaceutical studies especially included or excluded women in the final participants because they couldn't control the variable of our menstrual cycle. So a lot of that is changing. but science is a very slow process. And I think it's going to be, unfortunately, a couple of years before we actually get to reap the benefits of the newer studies where they are including women or they're focusing only on women, which is really fantastic. So discussions like this is really helpful and it's really important because funding goes where interest goes. So if we keep sort of showing that there is a need to be studying women in all industries, not just medical industries, it's not just medical research where that gender bias exists. But yeah, we need to keep shedding light on it.
Yeah, I think just one big thing. So I've got a few questions for you, and I want
Sure.
to just make sure that we cover some stuff. A very big thing for me is as soon as obviously married Vicky, and then we were looking at having kids, and then you fall pregnant, and then you start going through those little things. Everything becomes, don't eat that just in case. Don't eat that just in case. And there's so much kind of like, well, let's just not do this because we don't know better. But we want to try and actually just test those things to try to see where they are so that you can include certain things in your diet. You can include these things that are super beneficial, but that have more background. One of the big ones that I stumbled upon on one of, I think it was the Graham Brecker topics, he was talking about folic acid and the methylfolate function. And that was massive for me because Vicky got prescribed folic acid. Nobody knows if she can actually convert that into methylfolate. So she was actually putting something potentially, I think I'm not saying she's got good genes and she's definitely got that gene, but maybe she hasn't and maybe she's putting something. So there's a lot of information out there that people are then just saying, just do this, just do that, or they're very hesitant. A doctor will say, well, don't do that because you're pregnant, like training even. So I mean, we have women that are falling pregnant here at the gym on a constant basis, which is nice to see. Just that we're obviously keeping these women here training until their final days. Like Neil that just left now, his wife is due in, like now her due day is today actually. So for that, it's nice to see that we are trying to keep women going for as long as we can and trying to get more information to try and obviously back ourselves up to be comfortable to, if something does happen, they're not going to point the finger and be like, oh, but you said I could train, So I want to try obviously get as much information out to women like that, especially not just pregnancy, but with all other things. But let's just keep on doing this,
Yeah.
Are there any first topics that you want to talk about that are kind of like current? Like you mentioned now, there's a lot of like hot topics at the moment. We can obviously go into pregnancy and into things like that. I think hormonal things are obviously the key feature to try and touch on hormones specifically, because that's the big difference with men and women, and how we can fix that,
Cool. Yeah, I think it's a good idea to start off with the most obvious difference. There's a lot of ways that men and women are the same. I know that you guys have spoken before about the pillars of health, and those pillars of health remain the same. The things that you need to be prioritizing in your life aren't different, but the way that you do it will have slight nuances, essentially. One thing that I have heard a lot of, that I want to just come out the bat and say that yes, men and women have progesterone and estrogen more so than men, but men also have it. And men also have a high predominance of testosterone, and it's much higher than in a woman, but women also have testosterone. And it's also extremely important in the vitality, essentially, of women and women functioning in all phases of life. So that, number one, is a very important thing to remember, is that women also have testosterone and they also need testosterone. So the glaring difference is our menstrual cycle. There's a lot of, it's a hot topic, as you mentioned, in social media to train and eat and live, almost hack your menstrual cycle is the catchphrase I've been seeing a lot of. There is mixed data when it comes to exercise and diet specifically for your menstrual cycle. I myself have tried it. And for me, it worked really well. So I think as a almost blanket statement, I would say that it's worth trying. It's definitely not going to harm you in any way, but it takes a certain level of becoming in tuned to your body. So you might do it for 1 month and you might not really feel different, or you might find that you can pinpoint exactly where you can change things to suit you better. So it's very much, I can't give you the recipe that's going to fit for everybody. It's not a copy and paste for every single individual, every single woman, but the basics will be the same. And I think that I can just run through the basics.
Yeah, so I think take us through the basics. So I think because I mean, I'm pretty jacked up in terms of if I know how to test someone, like you mentioned earlier, Neil and I are always talking about like why I'm maybe doing a 3-day fast, or why I'm doing a single day fast, or why I do it for a while and then I don't do it. I'm trying to test things out, potentially not actually for myself to make it better. I do very specific things to make like things better for me, but I'm trying to test these things out so I can give light to other people. Be like, well, this is how I felt. This is what I did. So I think take us through what you've done before, specifically for yourself, what didn't work. And maybe someone can say, okay, cool, well, maybe let me try it like that, and then maybe I got the same outcome. So maybe take us through like a process of a month, because that's obviously how the cycles are, I think. So just fill me in there. Is
Sure.
it like 28 days or 23 days?
Average would be 28 days.
So I think take us through that whole process and how it could be different for some women. Like for you, it'll be like exactly like this. And then for other women, it might be slightly tweaked in what they could look out for.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah. I think an important part, if you're wanting to live in the rhythm of your menstrual cycle, you need to be able to track your cycle. So I always say that step number 1 would be to be able to track your cycle. So whether you're using a fancy app or a good old calendar, you need to be able to tell where more or less your ovulation window is. So that for me is the most important part, is knowing plus minus where am I likely to ovulate. The reason why I say that is because there's a very important switch in your hormones that happens after ovulation. And you also get this pretty boost of testosterone on or just before you ovulate, which means that if you're someone that's an athlete, you're looking at testing PBs and pushing performance, that's going to be a really key window for you in terms of your training and other aspects of health. So important would be to find your day of ovulation.
And they'll be more irritated and more agitated and things like that. So they'll obviously be able to get that like 1 rep max.
I mean, it depends who their partner is, I suppose.
Okay. No, guys, just this is going to be quite dangerous. So I've got a quick exit here and a quick exit. Neil, just know your exit things. And then when you do ask these very important questions, just make sure you've got a good exit strategy.
100%.
You're constantly on your menstrual cycle because you're always agitated.
It's always on his day of ovulation.
Again, it depends on your partner, you know. Okay, sorry, man. So take us through. All right, so we hit our 1 rep max testing on our days of...
day of ovulation or day before. Again, this you can tweak it according to you. Some women are so in tuned or so sensitive to the cues in their body that they actually experience some pain and cramping on the day of ovulation. You might not feel like you can train at your best, so the day before would then be optimal in terms of really pushing performance or testing PBs or whatever. But that's an important one. And then you can kind of work back to what is the first half of your menstrual cycle, meaning the day that you bleed up until ovulation, and then ovulation up until the day before you bleed. That's pretty much your full menstrual cycle. On average, it's 28 days, but it can vary 25 to 35 days at the moment, I think, is the accepted normal range.
Silly question. Would then someone that does have a slightly longer cycle possibly be able to perform better or use that window more? So like if you do have a longer period, then you would have more days where you've got a higher testosterone. Like, is that going to be...
not necessarily.
Okay.
The testosterone spike only comes in just before ovulation.
Okay, so it's almost like a window, like a 24-hour window, if you want to call
essentially,
it. Okay.
So it's just when that egg is being released from that follicle that you've been developing.
Okay.
That's essentially...
So the other days, in the bleeding days, that's just sorry for you. Just
it has nothing to do with your performance, unfortunately. But there are ways that you can still make best use of the hormones that are predominant, if I can put it that way. So essentially, the reason why that's so important, or in my mind, it helps think about ovulations in the middle, first half of your cycle. So that's from the day that you bleed up until ovulation, you are in an estrogen predominance, meaning that you have both. And in the beginning, they're both fairly low in comparison to later in the month, but it's still an estrogen predominance. And that builds and builds and builds. Your estrogen gets higher and higher and higher up until day of ovulation. And then after that, it flips. And then you start building a progesterone predominance and your estrogen becomes lower. Again, it doesn't ever go away, but it's dipping a little bit lower. So in your first half of your cycle, when you have an estrogen predominance, this is generally where you might feel your leanest. You'll feel more energized. And again, these are general sort of symptoms that you might feel, but it varies from woman to woman. Some people are more in tune. Some people are just more sensitive to these changes in their body, and that's fine. I would encourage you to try and listen to your body for a 3-month period, and you might find that you pick up these things that you've been missing all along. So again, you'll generally just feel better. It's a time of the month where things like hypertrophy training is extremely valuable in your first week. So while you're bleeding, provided that you're not in severe pain and it's not increasing your pain. So anything in your week of period, if it's increasing your pain, it's probably not a good thing. If it's improving your pain, fantastic. It should be. Your endorphins should be flowing. You should be feeling relief from your menstrual pain when you exercise. Generally, they say it's your longer rep ranges. That's your hypertrophy type training, your sort of 12 rep bracket. Weights you can start building from when you start bleeding up until day of ovulation, which you would obviously peak in terms of building up your load or building up how heavy in terms of weights you're challenging yourself. And then as you come towards ovulation, you'll find that your power type exercises, whether it's explosive power or just plain old powerlifting, you'll start to feel stronger and stronger and better in that. And that's because that estrogen is building. Something else that's quite important in that window is the way that we're using our carbs for fuel. So in general, women tend to burn fat better than men when it comes to any sort of, they call it physiological stress. So that would be exercise, would be fasting or other sort of stressful states, low sugar or hypothermia or whatever. But when you have an estrogen predominance in that time, you'll find that you are using your glycogen and you're using glucose stores much better because your body is so much more sensitive to insulin and your body is just better at utilizing that for a fuel. In your second half of your period, kind of the reverse happens where because you have a progesterone predominance, you'll find that you feel a bit more bloated more and more as you get closer to your period. You'll find you'll probably be a little bit more sluggish, a little bit more lethargic, and you'll tend towards your lower intensity, lower impact exercises. That's most likely because of the fact that in progesterone, you'll see it in pregnancy as well. That's why training is such a contentious issue in pregnancies, because progesterone can cause tendon laxity, meaning that you're more likely to get tendinous injuries. So either overstretching, straining, or just a straight up tear. It's something that you need to be conscious of, and you can definitely train around it. So I would normally recommend doing more mobility type exercises. Warm-ups are really important, cool downs are really important, and focusing on recovery, because you tend to recover worse, for lack of a better way to put it. So you'll get stiffer after certain workouts. You'll notice that you get more tired after workouts. But from the nutrition side of things, or I suppose from a fuel side of things, you are burning fat really well in the second half. So generally more endurance type, longer metcons, those sort of workouts you'll feel really good in because your body is really well primed to be burning fat as a fuel.
I just wanted to hit on 2 questions there just to paint a picture. So let's talk about a month then maybe.
Sure.
So we're saying that in general, women should try and stick to a fat-dominant diet. Then when you start going through that first part of your period, you can actually switch to more carbohydrates.
Yes, you
and
can.
then, so like not have like a binge week where you can think, but you can really then take advantage of that window and then like have a bit more of your carby kind of things, test it out and see how you feel. So it's all going to be trial and error because everybody is different again, depending on your genes and a whole bunch of other things. But that's kind of then the picture that you can do. So let's focus on using more fats as our fuel source. And then through that window, play around with your carbs. I wouldn't say carb cycle, but like play around with your carbs a little bit and see how you feel when you are feeling, you know, tired and lethargic and things like that. So if you get that window where you're feeling quite that, switch it up to a bit more carb and obviously good carbs. We're not going to say go and just, you know,
cheat
eat donuts
every day. So it actually works out really beautifully. And this is something that when I first came across the literature, it was beautiful. It's for lack of a better word. But you're anyways going to be doing more explosive training, more hypertrophy training. It would make sense that you would want to supplement more carbohydrates in your diet. You'd want to be giving your body that replenishing of what you're using during your exercise. So definitely, yes, I would focus on your slightly more starchy carbohydrates, if I can put it that way, in the first half. I always say if you're going to be eating a carb, the best thing you can do is make it a carb that's providing fiber. So it's almost like I look at it as the first half, I'm focusing on gut health, essentially. I'm making sure that I'm getting really good insoluble fibers, and that's usually in your green leafy vegetables, your sweet potatoes. I mean, if you like potatoes, you can do that as well, play around with it. And then in your second half, you can still eat carbs, but I would pick the lower sugar end. So your berries, things that still have fiber, still have some carbohydrates, but it's a much lower sugar choice. So yes, you can play around with it. I would definitely focus on fats in the second half. Good fats, obviously your avocados, your nuts, omega-3s are incredibly important, and you'll find that it'll actually help increase inflammation, which is happening in your uterus. It'll decrease your inflammation. You'll feel better. Your cravings will probably get better as well, because that's your stereotypical PMS symptoms. You're bloating, you're craving all sorts of naughty things. But it's interesting that you're usually craving things that are high in saturated fats. So your general cheat meals will be high in certain fats. They're unfortunately usually the bad fats, but if you can prioritize really healthy fats, you'll probably find that you're not craving those bad things as much.
Just a quick question there then. So we use quite a bit of omega-3. So I'm taking about 1,200, I think it's milligrams, in a serving. That's your DHA and your EHA. I've been using the real thing. It's quite a nice one. It's 150 tablets, and you can get quite a big bang for your buck. But I've been giving Vicky also 3 tablets now, upping it. Could you play around with an omega-3 like oil to try and help with that as well? Can you like increase your dose, obviously just depending on your gut, and then decrease it outside of that? So maybe on your ongoing, like when it's in your normal state, you'll take 3, but then through that cycle, you can even bump it up probably to 6 even, because that's about 2.4 milligrams. So 3 is like a threshold of guts, like you don't want to get the shits and things like that. So like 3 is my borderline. So I've played around with quite a bit to just see, and that'll help with the inflammation.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So I don't think that you don't necessarily have to hard and fast cycle it like that. Look, if you're getting a gram of EPA always, it will be beneficial. Some people might need a little bit more, especially towards the end. As you say, you can increase a little bit according to how you're tolerating it. But I would focus on the EPA value that you're getting a gram at least in the last 2 weeks of
I think what I'll do, just because we don't want to dig into just omegas, I've got a nice, the one with Dr. Rhonda Patrick, and I think it's Andrew Huberman. I think they do like a nice little talk on that. I'll plug that in because they cover that like in super detail.
Yeah.
Neil, any questions on as we go? Please just make sure that we're covering stuff that's sinking in your head.
Well, one of the questions we hear a lot about guys and testosterone these days having a drop in testosterone through whether it's, our food or even, I know, like paper receipts, and the printing is a big thing. Actually, guys shouldn't actually handle those things, and there's phthalates and all sorts of other stuff that affect men's testosterone and hormone levels, and there's this decrease in testosterone among young men and everything today. Are there issues in terms of that females need to be aware of in terms of what our environment and things bringing towards us that can have an effect on our hormone cycles and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. Look, again, I think there's huge gaps in science when it comes to that, studying specifically those things in terms of how they affect estrogen, progesterone. There's a lot of research going on at the moment with your phytoestrogens. Some people think that it can cause imbalances, and that's mostly in your vegan and your vegetarian diets. Again, I'm still awaiting really solid literature on that. I think with women, we naturally have a huge dip in hormones when it comes to menopause. So mostly your estrogen will be the one that causes most of your symptoms, but we also have a drop in testosterone. So anytime from about 40 years onward, I would recommend that women start paying attention to whether or not they're feeling any of those symptoms. And if you are concerned that you're starting to show some signs and symptoms of low estrogen, low testosterone, to actually get it tested, to get a panel done. Because more and more we're seeing girls starting period earlier. Back in the day, it used to be around 13, 14. Now as young as 9, 10, girls are starting their period. It's extremely alarming to me how much that's shifted. And it is thought to be a lot of the toxins, our lifestyle, diet, the quality of food that we're eating nowadays. There's a lot of suggested reasons why that's happening. And I think a lot of it is the food that we're putting into our bodies and the environmental factors that's changed so much. Yeah.
So when it comes to that food and, watching those hormone levels, what are the things that you would do or recommend someone would look at to help assist themselves?
I have a food first philosophy. So often I get questions about supplements and supplements for women specifically. And my answer is always food first. If you can bring it back to basics, meaning focusing on the quality of the sources that you're getting. And I'm not going to be too specific about what diet you should be following, but whatever diet you should be following, it should be as low processed as possible. Definitely processed food is a huge issue. You'd find that when you cut that stuff out, a lot of stuff that you've been struggling with will suddenly disappear. A lot of your sort of hormonal symptoms that you might have been having. There's a lot of talk in social media at the moment about like hormone balancing recipes, very low data to support that. I think if you're in general eating a really nutrient dense diet in as unprocessed a form as possible, you will be balancing whatever hormones you're hoping to balance. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's just one of those things that obviously people speak about things. It's like, okay, well, what should I or shouldn't I do? And yeah, I agree with you that for the most part, it's avoid those processed foods. So whether it's those high sugar, high saturated fat things, anything that's processed is going to potentially have more ingredients in it. It could cause harm on your body. So,
Definitely.
As a man or female, it just makes sense to try avoid those things as much as possible. And when it comes to things like that, also for a woman, and as age and that type of thing comes into play, and hormone levels, and there's things like muscle mass and that type of thing, is there, like we always talk about, you should be aiming for at least 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, and women are always afraid, well, muscle mass, this type of thing, like I don't want to get bulky, this type of, is it something you recommend from a protein source or intake along females, and does that potentially change with age or anything regarding in that menstrual cycle? Is there times when you should be having less or more?
I think definitely in the first half of your menstrual cycle, you need to be eating good protein. Again, your training will probably guide that, but I think protein in women is important, and the likelihood of us building muscles like two of you with eating the same amount of protein is the risk's fairly low, because we don't have the circulating testosterone that you will do. So I think unless you are specifically training for it, if you look at someone like Tia Toomey, she's not eating excessive amounts of protein, but she is living and training in such a way that it's geared towards her building muscle, right? We're not going to get into all the other stuff that helps you build muscle, but just from a point of view of if you're eating protein, you're not going to get bulky.
I think so that's a huge topic for me, and I try and get ladies to understand this as much as possible. Like they come to you and they're like, I don't want to do too many squats because I'm going to get big thighs. Like, okay, cool. But we want you to just move as much as you can and lift as much weight as you can because it's better for longevity.
100%.
Unfortunately, some people, women, do have a bigger bone structure, smaller bone structure. Like, it's your genes and who you are who are going to make you look a certain way. But if you just put all of that out of the window and say, okay, cool, I'm going to do these things for longevity and for muscle mass and to try and make sure that I do have as much muscle as possible. But unfortunately, women don't want to look a certain way. So like bigger traps or bigger shoulders or bigger lats and things like that. is there anything that you could recommend to do to not get that, but still kind of get the muscle mass benefits and things like that, you know? So
Yeah.
anything like
100%.
that, like that women can tweak, like higher reps or lower weight, or focus on this kind of diet that's going to make you a little bit more shredded, but not increase the muscle mass, you know?
Yeah.
Like, or not increase the muscle mass because we want that, but not get that look or whatever it is, you know?
Yes, yeah, I understand. Two things there for me. Number one, it's very interesting. Neuroscience has really boomed at the moment, I think, or I want to say the availability of information about neuroscience and making it, Andrew Huberman, making a little bit more accessible to the public. But something that I've come across recently, which is incredibly interesting, is that your nervous system, so your brain and all of the nerves throughout your body, is actually incredibly important when it comes to fat loss and body composition. So your fat cells in your body actually are supposed to be innervated, supplied by nerves. And those nerves are the ones that tell your body when and where to burn certain fat cells and to use it as a fuel source. So one of the things that's come out of this literature is that diversification of your training is one of the most important ways to keep those nerves in your fat cells as healthy and as active as possible. Meaning that if you're varying the exercises that you're doing, you are more likely to have a fat burning effect when you exercise. So that's one side, is that if you are wanting to make sure that from a fat loss or just even a weight management perspective, you need to be keeping your movements varied, right? The other thing, or the second thing, is that most certainly longer rep ranges is preferable in women. They do much better with the, I would say, 8 to 15 kind of a rep range, keeping your range of motion at the focus of your training. So not doing the shorter, more explosive stuff will keep you from developing, I want to say, a more athlete's look, a little bit more bulky, muscles a little bit more short and swollen, if I can describe it in that way. You can pretty much not bulk up by keeping it fairly, I want to say, moderate weight. I wouldn't necessarily limit it and say you only have to lift low weights. I mean, I lift fairly heavy weights and I wouldn't call myself bulky. But I think it's that fear of that sometimes can set women back in terms of body composition. So building muscle is actually extremely important for women as well, and resistance training and lifting heavy weights is extremely important for women because it also links to our bone health. And when we start dipping in estrogen as we get older, we're going to wish that we lifted those heavy weights when we were younger.
So,
It's
I
so
mean,
important.
just that topic alone is a big thing. I mean, I do obviously have quite a lot of older women around me, my grandparents, things like that. But when that hip fracture happens or that twisted ankle just off the step and then the bone breaks and it's like a straight through break, it's quite hard for them to turn around from that. And that's the specific thing that we're trying to do for longevity, is making
100%.
sure that we can squat to depth, we can get our hips through full range of motion, we can get our shoulders through full range of motion. And with that, move heavy weight. And moving the heavy weight, like you said, like with yourself, like I would call you a petite woman, you know, and it is your genes, it is what you do, but you also understand that all those things are beneficial for you.
Definitely.
So it's making sure that women and men obviously understand that by moving heavy weights is going to help with fat loss, and it's also going to help with longevity.
Definitely.
Try get that how I look thing out of the picture as quick as you can. We can focus on certain areas, like making sure you're not doing a trap dominant exercise. You know, by lifting stuff all the time, you will be using your traps. So then focus on not using your traps. You know, use your lats, use your scaps. So by focusing on your training and, like you say, doing higher reps, you can really dial in on that muscle group that you don't want to get bigger. If you do, I'm going to say, unfortunately, have that body type, that body composition, you know, things like that.
To be honest, running is also a really great way to debulk. So if you're having a balanced training of lifting heavy weights, but also doing cardio, I mean, I'm not a huge component of like the chronic cardio stereotype when it comes to women. You don't have to run marathons and all that, but making sure that there's also a healthy dose of cardio is not only good for you, but it also really helps stop you from
I'm going to say
from
something that
bulking
everyone's
up.
going to like what I say. Don't run too much. It's stupid. All right. So don't run too much.
Walk a lot.
Walk a lot.
Yeah, it's good.
Move an object. Bike ride if you can. Try to do something that does dig into that zone 2 at least twice a week. Go for a 40 to an hour, like do bike, run, ski, row. Like do something that's cardio based, but just try and move as much as you can, and again switching it up as much as you can. And I think that's why like functional fitness works so well, is because you're changing things up the whole time, but don't be scared of moving the heavy weights as much as you can. Neil, do you want to chip in there with that heavy weights thing, because we talk about it quite often?
Well, bulking is more going to happen from a bad diet than it is going to be from what you're doing in the gym. Like if you're having excess calories of the wrong things, that's what's going to add a layer of body fat over that muscle, which is going to make you look bulky. At the end of the day, when it also comes to cardio, women are predominantly more fat burning in their sort of fuel source. So making sure that you are doing some zone 2 work at a low intensity for a longer period of time is going to help you tap into where you're already strong. Having said that, obviously, we have to be careful of like, that doesn't mean like also smashing our bodies every day with high intensity metcons. Like HIITs had a major popularity rise, but too much of that also produces cortisol and stress in the body. So you want to find that balance of like, cool, I'm doing this 2-3 times a week, but I'm also spending a longer duration period where I'm focusing on that fat burning zone, and it's tapping into that energy system, which I'm good at and my body likes to use. The other thing that I find a lot with females is you guys simply just don't eat enough of the right stuff, but sometimes just in general. And you've been yo-yo dieting or on some sort of eating plan for most of your life, and you get into this place where you're stuck, where your body's like, I can't eat any less and I can't eat any more because I feel like I'm going to gain weight. And I've seen this a number of times where I've slowly had to increase females' calories, and then they've actually started losing body fat, because they've put themselves in a starvation period for such a long period of time where their metabolism is actually now shut down, and then they're doing huge amounts of cardio on top of that, right? So we want to be careful getting that caught in the trap where it's like, oh, I need to lose weight, or I need to lose body fat, I'm just going to starve myself. In the long run, that's going to cause more damage than it is going to do you any good, all right? And there's people that get stuck in that mentality, and like I've dealt with people who they struggle to ever get out of that because they're so caught in the cycle of, well, eat less, do more cardio, whatever else. And it can ruin you, especially over a long period of time. I'm sure Gizzy can talk to this too, where your hormone levels and everything get affected. And that is a big trap for females. So I'm not sure if Gizzy, you have anything else you want to add towards that warning.
Yeah, so I think the question there that I wanted, because I had a very specific question on cortisol, so Neil touched on that now. So that exact fact of how we're not eating enough, and guaranteed, I mean, I sometimes go through a day where I don't eat enough, but I've played around with fasting and a few other things that I've kind of tricked my body to use different fuel sources for my day of things like that. But we don't want to not eat enough. And how does that affect that cortisol, or like kind of like the start of the day, or that metabolic breakdown, then moving then forward over a long period of time? Like by doing that not eating thing, which I think if you had to ask women if they've done that, guaranteed they've done that, I'm just not going to eat to fit into this dress kind of thing, So take us through, I think, that breakdown.
Yeah, I think to start off, I really like the way that you are basically talking about it as a journey. It's not just a 30-day ab challenge or a 21 days to look your best or whatever. It has to be a lifestyle choice. When you're talking about maintenance of a specific body type or a body composition or a certain weight that you're wanting to maintain, muscle mass is extremely important in weight maintenance because it is a metabolically active tissue. So when you look at your energy expenditure in a day, it's made up of certain things, and a very, very small percentage is actually the exercise that you're doing. And a proportion of it is your NEAT, so your non-exercise thermogenesis, essentially me being all active, I'm busy burning calories while I'm doing this, or your shiver, or cold exposure, those sort of things, and then your basal metabolic rate, your BMR, and having a higher muscle mass that is your skeletal muscle mass, you're going to be increasing your BMR. So I think what you were talking about, eating too little, when you get used to eating so little, you don't have a very high muscle mass to begin with, or we've got a lower proportion of lean muscle mass in comparison to men, which means that at just sitting here, I'm burning less calories than the two of the guys sitting next to me, just purely because they have more lean muscle mass that's working right now.
So you are very jealous at right here, right now.
I'm
Me
so
doing nothing,
jealous.
heart rate of nothing, I'm burning fat, more fat. Yeah, okay, I'm just checking.
Literally. And yeah, so from that perspective, having lean muscle mass is really important when it comes to that longevity, weight maintenance over the long term, and not yo-yoing back and forth in terms of diet and calories. And then to touch on the cortisol side of things, so there is a metric called the CAR, so your cortisol awakening response. That's your cortisol spike that happens in the morning. In everybody, it's usually 30 to 60 minutes after you wake up. It's kind of to get the engines going, I suppose. And then throughout the day, it then dips until you eventually go to sleep. And you want that normal pattern to be able to have healthy sleep and healthy functioning throughout the day. Chronic overtraining, chronic fatigue, whether it's from high stress, sleep deprivation, whatever the case may be, chronic undereating and malnutrition. And in some cases, depending on the fasting regimen, but we also need more studies on that, that can cause an increase in that morning CAR. So a spike in that cortisol. The issue is that we also often pair that cortisol, feeling stressed, we're maybe working a really stressful job, or we're focusing on calories, so we're cutting out fats out of our diet, and we tend to eat a breakfast that's higher in sugar and very low in fat and protein. So if you think about cortisol and its action on insulin, which is the hormone that helps to move glucose from the blood into cells, where you can then convert it into energy and use it throughout the day. Cortisol suppresses that insulin response. Cortisol also tells your liver, okay, cool, something's happening that's stressful, I need more sugar, you need to be making more glucose. So not only are you stopping the hormone that's going to move that sugar into a cell and make it useful to you, that you can burn it and use it as energy, it's also telling the liver, okay, well, we need more sugar. Now you pair that with processed food, high sugar breakfast, something that doesn't have a lot of fat and protein, and you're causing an extremely high sugar spike in the morning without anything to help level it out, and you'll cause crashing, that sort of morning slump, or feeling hungry throughout the day, feeling jittery, feeling anxious, all sorts of things. So definitely undereating is over a long term. If you're going to do it like once or twice, it's not going to be such a big deal, but chronic undereating is definitely a stressor that's going to increase that cortisol response.
I think there's two things there. So, I do get some people that are like, I've got to fit in my wedding dress next week. How can you help? Okay, cool, don't eat. And we're going to do a few things and you'll fit, it's fine. But we're not going to use that as to lose weight because of your health. Like, we're not going to do that.
No.
The same thing I wanted to ask there. So, can you give us, so you spoke about that carb in the mornings may be a bad idea. What kind of breakfast would you recommend then for a woman? Like, obviously, men almost don't care what we eat. We'll just wake up and have steak or whatever it is. What would you avoid, and what would you maybe have guys then have a look at? Like having a smoothie but not making sure the carb content's too high, or having just boiled eggs and avo on toast. I always just recommend eggs and avo. Just have that in the morning, even without the bread if you don't want to. But have like a low GI bread or something like that. Is there something like that you'd recommend that you do on your days?
Definitely.
And then I want to just touch on fasting as well. So take us through that breakfast that you would maybe do.
Most important thing, if there is one piece of advice that I can tell a woman, is to have fat and protein at breakfast. Doesn't mean that it has to be completely low carb, no carb, but that most certainly should not be the focus of your meal. For me, I love having eggs at breakfast. If you've got time to do that and you like doing it, fantastic. Back in the day when I was still, I want to say, exercising much more. I was working a high stress job. I would have a little bit more carb in the morning because I felt that I needed that energy throughout the day, and I would hit quite a big slump in the afternoon. It worked well for me to mix eggs with something like pumpkin or sweet potato in the morning, and that was great for me. But nowadays, I'm a little bit more well balanced, if I can put it that way. And I like having something like an omelette with maybe some cottage cheese in the morning, plus minus a toast. I'm gluten-free, fully gluten-free. I've got a gluten allergy. So I tend to use breads that are more seed-based. I try to look for ones that aren't just like white rice flour. As you say, a little bit more complex carbohydrates. So if you're going to do carbs in the morning, I would look for something that's a little bit more grounded in fiber. It's not going to have such a high insulin spike. So your lower GI, more whole wheat. I don't really know what the right
Yeah, I think just to
way to
try and hit,
describe it is.
because I've been looking at that quite a bit. Neil's been doing quite a bit. So, I mean, those breads, just try and avoid bad seed oils. You can just Google it and
Yes.
just have a look
Canola.
at the packet. Just make sure there's bad seed oils out of there. And then again, like with your gluten intolerance, we all are gluten intolerant to some degree. So what I highly recommend is cut gluten out for a while. Try add a seed if you don't enjoy it. Just suck it up and do it. And then add your favorite kind of gluten back in that you are then testing out. I do a sourdough from Woolies. It's quite a nice one now. There's one or two things that I don't particularly like in there, but it's a much better kind of bread for me. Yeah, so I do that in the morning as well. I've cut my carbs down quite a bit, even though I do quite well on carbohydrates, but I feel better. So
Yeah.
I feel better on. I'm not doing a full carnivore diet at the moment, but for men, and you can maybe just talk about women with this, I'm doing more protein in the morning, more fats with a little bit of carb, and then through my day, try and avoid carbs, and then I will have carbs at one point in my day, but again, it's a good carbohydrate, but it's not a lot. I'm eating probably half the carbs that Neil's eating, and I've still been weighing in fine. I've been doing fasting and a few other things that I've been playing around with, and by cutting the carbs out, I still feel good, and I feel better, like with a lower carb kind of diet. Yeah. The second thing I wanted us to take through there was more of that, because you said the cortisol thing with the fasting could become a little bit of a problem. How would you recommend people then fast, especially around maybe your menstrual cycle, or not fasting at all through a menstrual cycle? And then when or how would you play around with a fast? I particularly do a 24-hour fast on a Friday just because there's no food in the fridge, and it's my busier day, and it just works for me. So take us maybe through one or two concepts that you would maybe do then for like a woman's intermittent fast, just because it does work well. But again, we don't want to be causing stress. Other thing that Neil mentioned now was that we're putting too much stress on our bodies. There's work, there's kids, there's looking after the household, which women do. Men just do, and then like everything else has to be done correctly. So all of that stress needs to be mitigated on top of then training, on top of then just being a woman, you know. So maybe take us through how intermittent fasting can maybe not be a benefit to women. Yeah.
Yeah. So to touch on the first thing that you mentioned about the carbs, again, it's quite a contentious issue. And I feel like the research yo-yos back and forth, and it's probably to do with who's funding the research. But I do think that carbs are important in women. I personally wouldn't recommend doing something like keto on a long-term basis. There is really good scientific research using something like keto for a short period of time to specific hormonal imbalances. They use it in people with epilepsy. So for very specific, I want to say medically guided reasons, I would suggest a ketogenic diet. But we just don't have enough studies to show a beneficial effect over a long period of time. So that's specifically in ketos where you're pretty much having no carbs. So I wouldn't want to cut out the food group completely. I would rather recommend looking at the quality of the carbs that you're eating, reading the labels. That's why I said, even though I'm gluten-free, it would be very easy for me to just be like, oh, this loaf says gluten-free, cool, let me buy it and let me eat it. But I still read the labels, what's actually in it. Is this basically just potato, which I don't really want to be eating, or planning when I want to eat it. So definitely breakfast, I would focus on good protein and fats before picking the carb, essentially. And then if you feel better on it, maybe you feel better without any carbs in your breakfast. Sometimes I have a super low carb breakfast and it works well for me. But again, in the first 2 weeks of my period, I actually find myself wanting more carbs in my diet. I'm a little bit more in tune with my cycle at this time because I've been doing it for so many years. But I find that at those times, I will have more fruit with my breakfast, or fruit in the afternoon before I train. So you can kind of feel it out, but I would say as long as you're focusing on having good protein and good fat at breakfast, you're already doing fantastic.
Yeah, so I think a big one that you said there was fruit. So when I said that I've cut carbs on our diet quite a bit, I eat a lot of fruit. I eat a lot of different berries. So I've got the kids eating as many different berries as possible,
Good.
just because of all the benefits from them. You can Google them and read up on them. So we have every single berry in the fridge, and then as well as a banana every second day. I have one every day, just because it is one of my bigger carb intakes. But so I think then having a look at something again that's quick and easy in the morning, especially when you're a busy mom or whatever it is. So make a smoothie, even if it's, and I'm going to say things that I use just because it's easy. Use things like a whey protein or a pea protein or a collagen, and then make something quick and easy that you can just, you've got it stacked there, just throw it into a smoothie and blitz it up and have it, and then just hack it back and drink it. But rather than, if you have got time, just make boiled eggs on a seed loaf or whatever it is, with some fruit as well with it, and some avo, whatever. So try have that kind of thing.
And you can meal prep boiled eggs quite
Yeah,
nicely.
so we do boiled eggs for the family. I do a whole tray. On a Sunday, I'll do 18 eggs, and then I'll break the egg whites off for James, who's very particular. Emily just eats whatever it is, and then I'll have it as they go. And then even Vicky does that now. She just does eggs and mayo just as like a little snack at work. And I mean, that sometimes is what's the only thing that she eats the whole day. Then she gets home and has dinner with us. And she's doing a little bit of running, things like that now. She's like, how do I change a few things up? So she's even like having a look at not doing a fasted. She does pretty much a fast, and then she eats in the evenings. And that works quite well for her. But take us through how the intermittent fasting could stress our bodies more.
Yep.
And maybe what you do particularly, like, so I do the 24-hour fast. So take us through the intermittent fast and how maybe it doesn't work for you or it does work for you, and what to look out for then to not cause stress.
So as I mentioned earlier, I've done every schedule of intermittent fasting that existed, including low-cal fasts, meaning that you don't consume anything more than 300 calories of specific food groups in a day, everything. There are a lot of studies to show the benefits of fasting, and there are many. It's fantastic, but again, I would tread with caution when it comes to being women. There are studies to show that intermittent fasting can suppress sex hormones, all of them, progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. The only one that they're unsure about is DHEA, but that's not really important for this topic, I suppose. So I'm wary with intermittent fasting over a long term. Again, I would almost pulse it, if I can put it that way. I do it naturally at the moment for at least 12 hours, meaning that the window between when I have supper and when I have breakfast in the morning is at least 12 hours. And that for me is really important because I still get all the benefits. So that 12-hour fast, although it's not quite as beneficial as maybe pushing past 16 or maybe bordering on 24-36, you get very specific benefits when you push past those different time frames. But even just doing a 12-hour fast on a daily basis, I'm not exerting any stress on my body because it's a natural fast. I'm sleeping, I'm not consuming any calories.
Yeah, I
but
was
all
going to
of the
say,
good
do it
stuff
while
is
you
happening.
sleep. So I think a very good note there, which people are like, oh, but what am I going to do that I'm not eating? Just do it while you sleep. You
Do
should
it
be
while you
sleeping
sleep.
8 hours. You've got
100%.
4 hours to go. Have a black cup of coffee, have a black tea, and
Yeah.
then 4 hours later,
Yeah.
then carry on.
And you should be prioritizing not eating in the 2 hours before you go to sleep, because that can also affect your sleep cycle, which is a whole other topic. But you should anyways be having at least 2 hours before you go to bed that you haven't eaten any calories, which means that you can wake up in the morning, it's fine. You can have a cup of coffee. Technically, it will, if you're having, cow's milk or a high carb milk, then it can technically push you out of the fast. But if you really want a cup of coffee first thing in the morning, maybe switch to tea. Maybe switch to having some lemon water in the morning rather than jumping into that first cup of coffee and then have your breakfast thereafter. If you're busy and you're on the go, it's a little bit more difficult. Maybe you want to pack it in and you can have breakfast when you arrive to wherever you're going, whether it's work or after you've dropped the kids off from school, and you can come back and have your breakfast then. See how it goes. See how it works for you. I have many clients that say first thing in the morning they're starving. I would probably say you should check what you're eating for dinner. But
I would just say man up and just have some salt water. Just have the little hydration thing that I do.
It's true, but
tea with some salt.
But again, you need to be wary of the stress that you're placing on your body.
So again, that stress, we don't want to put a woman into stress because we know 100%. What happens.
So I remember in my younger days, the big thing was, fasted cardio, and that was like the thing on a Saturday. You're going to wake up and we're going to go for a hike, or we're going to go for a long run or whatever. And I had noticed that every time, about half an hour into whatever exercise we're doing, I was having severe burning in my abdomen.
So like a little bit of gut stress, like if you want to call it.
A lot of gut stress.
On top of then you've got an inflammation issue with gluten and things like that.
100%, but it was actually in my stomach lining. And nowadays, I actually struggle with stress-induced stomach issues. Not quite an ulcer, but a gastritis.
Have you tried bone broth at all to help with that?
100%, yeah, okay. But it's
still there.
It's a long it's a chronic stress response.
Okay.
So I'm only now month 3 into my sabbatical, so I'm hoping it's gonna ease.
Yeah, so
ease off
we're
there.
not gonna catch up now and have a long chat because we're gonna do that afterwards. But so I mean.
But essentially, what the point is that if you feel like something is really wrong when you're trying to do a fast or fasted cardio, i.e. burning in your stomach should not be happening, then it's probably something needs to be adjusted. So it might be that it's an electrolyte issue that you need to be addressing. Electrolytes during a fast is very, 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 very important. You cannot be doing a plain water fast. It has to be with some salt in there.
I think
magnesium, potassium.
Just touching on that, and just let me know if it's any different for women. So when I've been doing these fasts as well, my water intake, and I think it carries on, which is I think beneficial for me. So I never drank enough water. My cholesterol was high. Ben and I went through quite a few years of trying to fix this. I've got quite a high fluid intake, but my fluid intake is very specific. It's got the right amount of electrolytes, things like that. When you're doing a fast, if you're not you have to be super focused. You have to have things prepped. You'll see I've got always a liquid prepped or whatever it is. I've got a sneaky coffee there and things like that. But you've got to have those fluids prepped. And anything that you're doing, I would even say people should even contact you then directly and be like, this is where I am. This is what I struggle with. How would you recommend that I try a fast? And then they've got to have a plan going into that window of even 12 hours. So some people, like I'm trying to say it's an easy window. You've got to be quite particular with it. Like you're saying, 2 hours before bed, when you wake up, do a few things. Do the salt water when you wake up. Skip the coffee. Even if it's a little bit of milk in your coffee, try skip it. And then do you break fast then with a high fat, high protein still? Or do you tuck into carbs to try prolong, let's say, the keto side of things? Or do you go into a little bit of carbohydrate straight away with your 12-hour window? Or how do you break?
No, I generally break with high protein, high fat.
Yeah.
As I said, women tend to burn fat as fuel really well anyway. So it's, for me, a physiological advantage that I have, that when I'm breaking with a protein and a fat, although the protein can spike your insulin a little bit, so technically you're not actually fasting. You've consumed calories. The amino acids will spike your insulin a little bit. But I just feel so much better when I do it that way. For me personally, if I went into hot with carbohydrates after I'd done a fast, especially after a 24-hour fast, I actually found that I bloated quite a lot. I'm not 100% sure what is the physiology behind that, but I just found that breaking with a fat and a protein worked well for me.
Yeah, I think for me that works very well just because I feel quite good quite quickly as well.
Yes.
So some of my fasts, I've been doing it even on my shorter fast with bone broth. That's why I mentioned like try the bone broth. I feel quite good quite quickly. I almost don't even want to eat after that. So I have a whole, you can just get it at any deli, whatever it is. But the bone broth, I have the whole bowl. It's like just a bowl of soup. I sometimes add a little bit more salt to it, but it is quite salty already. But that for me, like I feel quite good.
Yeah.
It even helps me sometimes if I'm breaking fast. I normally break fast in the evening, even go through to the next morning. And I don't even feel hungry the next morning. So I've technically broken fast quite well. Then I start eating protein and fats. Staying in ketosis for me, and then for me, it's kind of a better feel good feeling. If I'm doing a back to back, so I do a 3-day fast into a 16-hour fast. And that bone broth helps me quite a bit. So protein and fats are super key. I've tried it once with carbohydrates, and like you say, my gut just
It doesn't like
I
it.
almost like, ooh, what's going on here? Like I don't know if I'm going to take a shit now. I don't know, like what's going on here. It's really bad.
Yeah.
Neil, you're itching for a question there. What have you got for Gizzy there?
I don't know. So I think we need, like, when it comes to the egg breakfast thing, I think we need to clarify a little bit on like what is a good egg breakfast, because you got all these different things of like egg white omelets, like a whole egg, one egg yolk, and da 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 da. At the end of the day, people need to understand you're also trying to get a certain amount of protein in, and like a boiled egg is not enough protein. So you do want to be careful about how much you are taking in and how much you're also not taking in. So you want to sort of find that balance. So I don't know if you want to talk to that in terms of exactly what you're doing from that point of view and like what you're looking at when you are putting that breakfast together.
Sure. So if I'm not mistaken, I think one egg is like 6 grams of protein,
6 to 7, yeah.
depending on the size of egg that you're buying. But I do 4 eggs for breakfast, and I do 4 full eggs for breakfast. For me, it's quite important because although the yolk is predominantly where a lot of the calories sit, the white is where the protein is sitting. There's a lot of very, very important nutrients sitting in that yolk as well. So for me, I do 4 full eggs for breakfast. I generally do them either, I think most mornings I do fried, but an omelette would be preferable for me.
I just think it's important for especially the females to understand that those egg yolks are not going to just make you fat all of a sudden, and
No.
that you rather have those and get the full nutrient benefit out of that egg than just sacrificing with like 10 egg whites or whatever the case is. That it is important to get that in.
Definitely.
Um,
Rather cut out something nonsense later in the day than sacrifice on a really solid breakfast.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was also when it comes to the carbohydrates is around training, and especially we in a CrossFit box. Like I know personally, and I've seen this with people I've worked with, that the high intensity activity, like replenishing yourself with a good carbohydrate after training or sometimes even during training, can help a long way to keep intensity but also boost recovery. This is something I like to talk about too, in terms of you need to feed your muscle mass to be able to get the most out of it. So post workout, by replenishing with a good carbohydrate, you restoring that muscle mass, putting it into a state where it wants to go, okay, I'm recovering, I'm getting stronger, I'm going whatever else. And it's not always just focusing on, like, oh, I finished this high intense activity, I'm going to down a protein shake. Is an essential part of actually replenishing with carbohydrates post workout. So obviously females tend to be a little bit more scary about things like that, because like, oh well, I'm going to gain weight if I'm having too many carbs, etc., etc. But I think they can sometimes miss that important sort of aspect of getting those carbohydrates in to help recover for your next training session, replenish, also feeding that muscle mass. So yeah, for me, that's a topic that a lot of females can sort of miss out on, and even supplementing with things like creatine, especially with high intensity or sort of strength training, that women maybe get afraid again for that bulking issue. And I think it's things that a lot of females are missing out on.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable points that you're bringing up there. I definitely am a fan of, I call it my Ricky D. It's
Right.
my recovery drink. There are some newer studies debunking nutrient timing and, like getting that protein after the workout. But I'm still a really big fan of it, especially when I've been pushing my intensity or pushing heavier weights, maybe a little bit of a higher load week or a higher load workout, I can physically feel that I'm empty, if I can put it that way. And especially when you're doing a CrossFit workout, it's highly varied. There's a lot of complex movements going. You need to be refueling your body. And if you're not refueling your body, you're then again pushing into that chronic stress rather than exercise having a good effect on your cortisol, because exercise also increases your dopamine, which then has a positive effect on your cortisol, that CAR that I mentioned before, rather than it being a chronic stressor. It's actually beneficial for your cortisol. So you need to be fueling the exercise that you're doing. I personally have dabbled with your more artificial carbs in the form of like a store-bought dextrose, especially when I was doing a little bit more competitive training. I was a swimmer in high school. I used glucose powder and dextrose powder a lot to fuel my training, and that was really, really vital. But I find that if people are interested in it, they can contact me, because I've got like a table at home where you can work out according to your body mass how much carb after training is necessary. And this is training that's at least, I think the guideline is 30 to 40 minutes of fairly high intensity training, or at least training where you're training against resistance, or if it's endurance training when it's been a steady state for 40 minutes. You need to be replenishing your muscle glycogen, and to a small percentage your liver glycogen as well. That one you're going to be doing more with fruit. So my recovery drink has an element of fruit in it. It's got an element of pure carb in it, and then obviously a really good source of protein powder. I'm personally not a huge fan of whey, but I just can't digest it really well. So if it works for you, lucky you. But I am using collagen at the moment as part of it. And then 100% there needs to be salt. In anything that you're doing after you exercise, there needs to be salt.
Yeah, so I think Neil's pretty spot on with that topic. That's exactly what I wanted to touch on, was that carbohydrate window. Ben debunked it a little bit in the previous podcast with that whole thing, but I'm still pretty set on it just because it fits into routine. So I'm a very routine-based person, so I'm not going to randomly have my protein shake with salt in and carbs at 2 o'clock in the day if I'm training at 10. I'm going to have it at 10:30 or whatever it is while I'm training or when I'm finishing. So what I think there is that synthetic carb that you mentioned now is that if someone comes to see me and they're trying to sort out their stuff, I sometimes recommend like a Gorilla Gainer from the and it's got a lot of carbs in, and they're like I think it says on the tub like 600 calories per serving or something like that, and they're like, okay, like that's scary, like, but try and not be scared. Obviously, we want to just make sure you're getting the right amount, but try fix that. And then you mentioned, I'm just going to give some quick, easy tips of, I do the Rhodes little squish. So after I'm training, and I sometimes recommend that ladies you're giving it to your kids anyway.
That's
and
your,
this and
your
that.
pureed fruit.
Yeah, like the pureed fruit. There are some with sweet potato and pumpkin and carrot and a few other things. So have a look at that. I think it's a pink one and the orange one. I'll maybe just post it on the link here after. So try and get ready available carbs that you can just leave in your training bag. I mean, I leave squish in my training bag all the time. I'm like, I forgot to, I've run out of carbs, of dextrose or whatever it is. I just go and I just have that. So those are quick, easy things.
The recommendation for after training carbs would be to try and keep the fiber fairly low. So I think bananas are an exception because they're so valuable in terms of their potassium. They do have a high glucose, or they provide a lot of glucose as well. They're slightly higher in fiber, but I would still recommend a banana. But I think when you're talking about post-workout carbs, to just be careful that you're not picking your higher fiber carbs for that specific purpose. Your dinner then can be your nice complex carbs if you can have carbs as your dinner. But just being careful, with those sources, that it's something that needs to be easily digestible. That's not going to cause bloating after your exercise.
So that's why the synthetic carb is so nice, and that's why sometimes when we recommend these things, that ladies need to just not be too scared of them. Try them out, see what works for you. There's so many different complex carbs. All the different brands have their little signed off little, I don't know, like stack, like they always call it, like a maltodextrin stack or whatever it is. Just play around with those things and then see what protein you can link it to. I like the Gorilla Gainer because it's linked to a pea protein. I also avoid dairy, but then I'm adding collagen to it. So I'm just having my Gorilla Gainer, and I'm throwing 2 extra
Yeah.
scoops of collagen to that.
If you're nervous about it, maybe it's the first time that you've really thought about post-workout nutrition, or it's something that you're quite nervous about gaining weight, I would keep it as specific as possible, meaning that instead of buying a combination one, although I haven't specifically looked at Gorilla Gainer, but I would look for specific elements that I can then have control over what I mix.
Yeah.
So the formulation that I use is that I have a dextrose, I have my pink salt that I love.
I think that's very
have
nice,
my-
yeah, so that you can
I
actually.
can control.
So I'm lazy, so I just throw one thing together and I'm getting kind of that much.
Yeah.
But I think you're quite right. So I think if it's the first time you're doing it, buy them individually. Then once you're okay with that kind of combination, then have a look at a combination that you can buy off the shelf that you're not mixing 7 things together.
100%.
Take us through the creatine, because that's a very high topic of me
Sure.
of late, and especially with women. I'm telling every single woman that I see, take creatine, take creatine, take creatine. Vicky's starting to do some walking now into running.
Yes.
She finished her first run now this week without stopping, so it's quite cool. Yeah,
Oh.
so she's into it, and now I'm like, how do I get creatine into her? Because she doesn't drink any smoothies, she doesn't do anything like that. So I'm
Yeah.
thinking like, okay, tablet form, but now she's taking 17,000 tablets in the evening. So take us through then creatine
Yeah.
for women, and any nootropic kind of evidence that you've maybe read up lately of how it helps as well. Just because Lindsay's here again, and we've been using creatine for a while now, and I just want to reassure maybe a few things there, and then maybe if Neil has any questions after that on the creatine specific, just I want to try to get a deep insight there of your creatine
Sure.
use.
I love creatine. I also come from a background where I thought that if I took creatine, then I was going to build really large muscles, but it's not 100% true. I do think that sometimes people overdo it with creatine. You really don't need 20 grams. You don't need to have loading doses. 5 milligrams of creatine, which is usually the one little small scoop in the creatine container. And I take 5 milligrams a day, and it can be at any time of day. Doesn't have to be peri-workout, during workout. I like to actually drink it during my workout. So in my water when I'm working out, I have basically 5 mils of glutamine and then 1 little scoop of creatine. You don't taste it. And I just feel good when I'm training on that, essentially. Creatine is useful in many different ways. I'm pretty sure Ben has done an in-depth, and my philosophy on creatine is pretty much the same as his. So if you would like all of that hectic stuff, you can go and
Yeah, so
listen
it's
to
on our
his.
supplements talk where he digs into it. But I think just highlight for women where you, like, I just want to bring the fear away from women
Yeah.
of that same thing. So we're trying to bring the fear away of like bulking, which we spoke about earlier, just with the weight training and building muscle mass, things like that. We want to bring in the fact that creatine is a good thing to have in your body,
Yeah.
like protein, like fats, like carbs,
Yeah.
like you said, glutamine. These are all things like I'm sure any woman out there will use glutamine because they know that it's going to help with muscle recovery. So
Not
is
just that,
creatine.
yeah.
Not just that, but I mean, so is creatine to the depth of that.
Yeah.
And then also with brain function and a few other things, you know.
I was just about to say,
Yeah.
what I love about creatine is that not only is it helping with your actual training and your recovery in training, but it's actually really good for cognitive function as well. So it is a really important component in your diet. It's an important supplement if you're going to be picky and choosy about supplements that you're picking. It's one that I would include for the active individual. If you're not someone that trains a lot, but I don't think that's our audience today, you can kind of pick and choose other supplements over it. But I think that if you are active, if you are engaging in metabolic pathways associated with exercise, it is an important supplement to be taking. And when you're taking the 5 milligrams a day, I promise you're not going to bulk up. You're actually just going to feel far more empowered and stronger and fuller in your workouts. You will find, and this is maybe something that I should mention, with creatine, it does draw water into the muscle cells. So you might find that you start using creatine and your number on the scale, if you're regularly weighing yourself, the number on the scale might go up, and you might get a big fright and think that this is detrimental, but it's actually not. It's just water being sucked into the muscle cells.
So I just want to highlight on that. That's exactly why we do the in-body and why we specifically make sure that we're weighing in on the in-body scale.
Yes.
If you get onto your home scale and you freak out, you're an idiot, all right? You need to make sure that you know what your body is doing. And then we have a look at your muscle content. Hopefully you get the result of muscle mass increase, body fat decrease, but I'm still 62 kgs. So I want to also get that, so that look that the ladies are going like, I don't want to look like this. I don't want to weigh this much. Take that out of your head. Like, if you don't want to weigh 49 kgs, then cut off your leg, because you need to weigh a certain amount of what your body and what you were born with needs to weigh. If you weighed, I hate this, I used to weigh 60 kgs in school. No one cares, all right? You are older now, or whatever it is, and you're in school and you were still growing and developing, and now you're exercising even more, and you've had 2 kids or 3 kids. Get that number out of your head. Find a new number. Come and see me, come and see you. Find a new number, and let's work towards that new number on an in-body scale or whatever it is, where you can actually be accurate with that, So take us through the last little bit of creatine there. Or
just as a side note, I'm 15 kgs heavier than I was when I left high school. I mean, I don't look all that different, but body composition is really, really important. I think that's where in-body is super valuable, because you can visualize where the stuff is going, where the weight is going. And so weight is actually quite a poor metric of success in a weight loss. Or I know it's a bit of a misnomer to be talking about weight loss, but I don't think anyone is really wanting to lose weight. We're wanting to change composition.
Yeah, and
we
take
just
a
don't know how
picture
to
as well.
express that necessarily.
Take a photo in the mirror. I quite like Donna's one that she put on her own profile. Like, she's taking a photo of a, like, make sure the distance is right, and take a photo or see how you want to feel. Go and talk to someone, come and see you, and be like, this is where I'm carrying my body fat. How do I lose this? Okay, cool. Let's make sure that on the in-body scale, we're losing fat in that area, and we're making sure, like Neil said earlier as well, the fat is overlaying the muscle. Let's lose the fat and let's build on the muscle and try and move on from that, Yeah.
And there will be a transition period. So you might embark on a new journey. Maybe you got advice from either one of you guys, or you came to see me, or you saw Ben, or whoever, and they recommend a certain thing. There is going to be a transition period where you might stress and doubt, because maybe things look like they're not, or the number on the scale isn't going in the direction that you thought it would. But in the long term, it will flip, because sometimes what happens is, when you've got a lot of fat overlying your muscle and you start doing weight training and your muscles start to increase in mass, not necessarily to say that you're bulking, but you are increasing your muscle mass. And that's a good thing, because you're burning more calories with that muscle, and the fat on top of it is going to start burning off, so to speak. So there might be that transitional period where it seems like stuff is going in the wrong direction, but it's just a transition, and it's going to switch to the other side, and you're going to get on the other side and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this long time ago?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Neil, hit that question there in your head.
Yeah, no, I think it's just like we need to speak to that transition period. As like I mentioned earlier, with females especially been dieting for a long period of time and overdoing the cardio. Like, sometimes you need to go backwards before you can go forward again. It's like, to shoot that arrow, you got to pull that arrow back before it can sort of shoot forward. And you got to take those steps back, because if you don't take those steps back, you're actually still going nowhere slowly, like in the long run. So if you're in that period where you find you're a little bit stuck and things haven't been moving where you want to go, and you need to reevaluate certain things, and you might need to make some changes, it doesn't mean those changes are going to have a positive effect straight away. You might go backwards before we can go forwards, because you need to get that body back to a healthy state where it wants to now let things happen. All right. And it's temporary. It's going to pass, and eventually you'll get to a space where you're going to go forward again. And if you didn't do that, you're not going to go forward anyway. So you have to sort of suck it up and go, cool, I've done some damage to myself over the last period of time. How do I rectify that? And that means getting your body to a healthy state by going a little bit more backwards, and then we can transfer and go forward again.
It should never take less than 12 weeks.
No.
Never, ever.
It didn't happen in 12 weeks. It's not going to disappear in 12 weeks. Like,
Yeah, I just want to maybe end off there, and we can take some questions. But unfortunately, again, like the people we're talking to, the ladies, they've gone through, and if I just use Vicky as example, James is 6 years old now. In there, we had Emily as well. It's been 6 years of like really, really tough stress on her body. And she's only trying to find herself now over a 6-year period. She's not going to fix that overnight, like it's not going to be even a year. I mean, I think she started working on a few things last year, September, and it feels like we're nowhere. But like the big thing is that she told me, oh no, she made that run, and it's not even far. I don't want to even go into details of how far she ran, but she ran unbroken, and that little successor is like minuscule, but like she is going forward or whatever it is. So we need to encourage women. You've smashed your body over a long period of time. Maybe you've even been further back, that you maybe had a poor diet as a kid or whatever it is. So now you're even further back. And Ben spoke about it now in this last week's podcast, where we spoke about the fat cell multiplying and then multiplying. Like you might have serious damage to your body. And I think that's where we've got, even as moms, to make sure that we're looking after our kids. Because if we do this damage to them as kids, which we don't mean to do, no one is out there saying, well, I'm just feeding my kid to make them fat. No one is saying that. But we are by mistake doing certain things. We're not maybe looking at it. So we may be educated the fact that we know that this soda is making my kid unhealthy, but we're not looking at it. And that damage that you've caused over a long period of time, and then the period that you've had kids or you've had stresses or life things, that's going to take a long time to fix. And there's no quick fix. Make it a 5-year goal. If you've been out of action for 5 years, make it a 5-year goal, or even double it. All right. Or just start on a long journey, like Neil always talks about. Just make it this long journey of, I'm going to fix it over time. And I think I like to just reference back to Lindsay, because she's the best thing like on track now, is that she's doing so well because it's just this long journey that we've got to. And in her head, I think she's accepted that it's a long journey. There's no rush to get to this weight. There's no rush to get to this goal. There's no rush to get off the medication. There's no rush to do anything. Just take it day by day. And if you have a bad month, have a bad month. You're a mom, take a step back, take the stress off, sleep more, try just do those basic things. Don't even train if you don't need to, but dial it back a bit so that you're not stressing your body out the whole time. Yeah. All right, I think we should switch into some questions from the audience, just because we might have quite a few and it might take some time. So
sure.
I think, guys, let's fire it up. Let's have a question. I'm going to grab a sip of water, maybe just wee quickly because I need to wee. But let's start with a question from the audience, and I'm going to wee so long, and then Gizzy can answer it. All right, let's go. Who's got questions? Oh, and the man has the question. Okay, here we go.
That's unconventional.
All right, buddy, let's smash a question. Guys, try keep it off of anything that we've covered already, or highlighting something that we have covered, and then maybe just do a recap on it kind of thing.
Sure.
All right, I'm going to take a wee break, and then let's fire that question.
I don't think the full cream milk is the issue. So I would actually recommend, if you're going to have caffeinated, pretty much anything, but caffeinated coffee in the morning, is to actually try and push it past 30 minutes to 45 minutes from waking up. I think that sometimes we get into a habit of using that caffeine to try and like pick us up. But your body has its own natural way of waking you up. And that first sort of insult of caffeine first thing in the morning can actually deter or disrupt those normal morning processes, that normal morning cortisol that happens. So for me, I drink decaf in the morning, but I don't think the full cream milk is an issue. That the milk that you choose to have in your coffee is a different discussion, but it's definitely not an issue. I would just recommend that if you're going to do caffeine, is to try and wait maybe 30 minutes before you do so. Yeah. Yeah, if you're going to be fasting in the morning, then either black coffee, black tea, anything without, because the issue with the dairy or even something like oat milk is that it is a sugar. So dairy has lactose in it, and the sugar is going to cause an insulin response, and that insulin response will break the fast. So if it's just a clear liquid, you can drink anything that's a clear liquid that's calorie free. Obviously, cool drinks don't count. Yeah. And preferably, there's a lot of contention about artificial sweeteners as well. Some people think that, if I drink my black coffee with an artificial sweetener, there isn't enough evidence to show whether or not it's breaking your fast. So if you can do without, do without. Yeah.
I caught that question while I was in the bathroom. I was trying to listen as I was trying to pee quietly so I could hear it. So there's two things I want to try and add there. So the decaf thing is definitely something to try and do. We did decaf while Vicky was pregnant for 2 years, 2 full years. We switched back to normal coffee because it's cheaper. And there was no real change except for the fact that I think you're going to put a lot of stress on your body as well. I don't know if Ben and I were talking about it one time, but can you take us through the caffeine? It kind of puts a little bit more strain on your body. So like Vicky's having two, so I mean, she has a coffee first in the morning, then she'll have another coffee straight after that with a cigarette. Then she's having multiple, but she's drinking the top part of the coffee. So when I say she's having 8 cups of coffee a day, she's only having 8 divided by 3 because she's not even finishing third. So she's having like 3 to 4 cups of coffee a day. What would you recommend that women try to dial it down to caffeinated coffee just to try and make sure that there's no further stress on the body?
Yeah.
Things like your adrenal glands and a few things like that. I think Ben and I spoke about this, probably not on a podcast yet.
So coffee obviously it's a stimulant. It's going to be stimulating more of a sympathetic response, if I can put it that way. And if you take into account that your cortisol is already spiking in the morning, you don't want to now further that, if that makes sense. And then within that 45 minutes, your cortisol has peaked and it's sort of going down. So it's just the recommendation that if you can do without for the first 45 minutes. I actually I don't have any caffeine in the morning. It's been quite a good switch for me because I also feel like I'm less dependent on caffeine to survive for the rest of the day. You're not yo-yoing between caffeine spikes, if that makes sense. It's also quite useful because then you can use caffeine to help with training.
Yeah, so I think Ben
cool.
went through this quite nicely in our hydration talk, and I want to maybe try and encourage people to do the same thing. So in the morning, I now do my black tea with a little bit of salt. I used to just do water. I'll probably switch back to water soon. And just play around with that window. So try and push that window of caffeine just as far as you can. I think I'm pushing the window now to 10 o'clock when I'm here for my first work shift. But up until then, there's nothing. I've got just a black tea in the car.
That's great.
Yeah. So try and push a window. And then again, I don't get the effect of caffeine, sadly, but I do enjoy coffee.
Yeah.
But try and narrow that window of coffee down. So again, if you've got that cortisol coming up, you've got your tiredness kind of part of the day in the middle to the last little part of your day, try and have a window of caffeine, let's say 10 till 2, maybe 10 till 3, and then start coming off so that you can help your sleep. So I think try really be specific with your coffee. As much as you love coffee, I see coffee cups all around you just because we've got the guys outside you helping us out today, but try just narrow that window down. Try decaf. It's not that bad. It's like non-alcoholic
really
drinks. Yeah. Like I always tell guys, just drink a non-alcoholic beer. It's the same thing. And then Vanna will say, but it's like kissing your sister, like it's not the same thing. So we want to try and just get that mentality out of our head. It's that, why are you drinking this thing? Is it because you like the taste, or is it because you want the kick? If you want the kick, then you've got to sort out your windows. Then make sure that you're only having in certain windows. If you like the taste, then play around with the decaf, play around with a non-alcoholic drink and things like that. I've got a question about alcohol because I'm very just hot on topic at the moment. Can we try and encourage ladies to not drink alcohol as much as they can because of the effects, especially the wines that we are having? I'm seeing the faces drop immediately. Wait, let's take another question from the crowd and then we'll maybe go into my alcohol topic. Okay, Nikki, let's go.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm. Yeah. So again, I think there's mixed data on that because of the fact that when you're going into menopause, you're going into an estrogen deficiency and a progesterone deficiency, and your testosterone levels will dip as well. So from what I could gather, intermittent fasting is probably beneficial when you go post-menopause because you're anyway sitting in a deficient state. If you're on something like HRT, that's maybe even a good combination because you're getting exogenous estrogen to give you all of those great benefits, and it's not going to, should I say, the fasting is not going to down-regulate that production of hormones because it's not coming from you, it's coming from outside of the body. So I wouldn't see a problem with intermittent fasting post-menopause. I think perimenopause, it's different. I would definitely tread carefully with fasting when you're sort of starting to get your symptoms of menopause. But once you're through and you're out on the other side, then I think it could actually be super beneficial. You'll probably fall into the men's category where fasting is a fantastic tool in men.
Yeah, I think one thing to add there, so I'll try to find the same Rhonda Patrick thing that I listened to because they actually talk about that a little bit because she's very keto pro and she highlights that a little bit. And I think just with that, can the ladies at that point come to someone like you and Ben and come and test where they are, and then specifically with treatment? So you mentioned some kind of treatments. Also, then look at a different diet. So, like, come to you and then I'd say, I just did my full blood panel. Maybe we can get one of the ladies at the box or that's close to the podcast to come and do their full panel. And then we start putting out there maybe the different age categories. So we get someone 20 to 40. I'm going to get these ages wrong now. 40 to 60. And then obviously 60, then it's going to be very specific. Are there certain things, just change those ages for me quickly?
Yeah. So I would probably say I wouldn't really be testing hormones before the age of 20. Or should I say, I wouldn't lump that into anyone else's category. So I'd probably say 20 to 30, 30 to just before 50, because 50 is when you would expect menopause to happen. So definitely 50 needs to be its own demarcation. So I'd probably say 20 to 30, 30 to just before 50. And then from 50 onwards, 50 to 60 is a sweet spot for hormone replacement therapy. And then from 60 onwards, it's a bit of a different story. So we can maybe lump either do 50 to 60 or do 50 onwards.
And then just after they've had kids, so if someone's just been through like a full pregnancy and then maybe even a second or a third, should they do blood work checks directly after that or through that period?
I wouldn't necessarily do directly after because
Maybe a
you're
year
obviously
later?
going through a
Yeah,
huge transitional change. You're still coming down from having very specific pregnancy hormones. So I would probably say at a year mark is a good time to be doing a hormone panel or doing a full body panel, actually.
I don't want to link it to breastfeeding, but maybe when you stop breastfeeding, because that's normally when you are not doing anything different in the body and you may be back to your normal state.
For sure. I think definitely if you've started having your periods again, that's a good indication that...
Which is normally after breastfeeding.
Which is normally after breastfeeding. Not everybody is fully amenorrheic or loses their period with breastfeeding, but if you're having a period, then it's a good time to after pregnancy.
Any other questions? Okay, we've got them firing. Let's go here quickly.
Sure. Yeah. Mm. 100%. Sure. So I think your first question on fatigue, it's definitely worth doing a blood panel, not just looking at your normal stuff, which would usually be full blood count, which is very important. You'd look at kidney and your liver function, but on top of that, checking your thyroid is very, very important. Females have a much, much higher percentage of thyroid disease in men. It can speak to hypothyroid, so underactive thyroid, but sometimes even in a high thyroid, you might present with levels of fatigue or fatigability. And then it would also be a good idea to look at things like hormones, to your normal sex hormones, but also to look at your autoimmune markers, because we are seeing a huge spike in autoimmune diseases, especially amongst women. And I think a lot of it goes undiagnosed or unpicked up for years and years and years. So I think if it's something that is really bugging you, to get a full blood panel. We don't do it as much. I know overseas they do a lot of nutrient panels as well. So looking at very specific sort of micronutrient deficiencies as well. Vitamin D, B12, all of those should be tested in the panel as well. But definitely it's worthwhile getting your bloods checked.
Just on the thyroid one, just make sure when they are going, if you're not going through Ben and Gizi, because they'll obviously do the right ones, but just make sure that you're checking especially the T3. If I'm not mistaken.
So I would want to get the FSH, the TSH, sorry, I'm doing the menstrual cycle, your TSH. So there's different levels in the brain. So I would want to get a full
Yeah. So don't just
panel.
do the general one. There's like one where they just take the general. You must do them individually.
TSH, T4 and T3 would be useful, because then you can, if there's an abnormality, you can figure out where the problem is. If you've only got one, then you kind of have to do further testing to figure out where the problem is. So you need to do the full panel. Yeah. And then your second question about sort of post-pregnancy. Unfortunately, you're never going to get your pre-pregnancy body back, because those changes are fairly permanent and they're natural. So it's not necessarily something that you should feel pressure to bounce back, if that makes sense. Your pre-pregnancy weight as well is something that's contentious. I wouldn't kill myself about getting back to the same weight. I would focus once again about getting back to healthy functioning in terms of activity. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So if you can sort of I wouldn't really focus on exercise before 6 months, especially if you've had a cesarean section. It's major abdominal surgery. Please don't force yourself back into a gym. But I would say at 6 months, you can start looking at weaning yourself back in. And then it's also not booking yourself into a CrossFit class and going balls to wall on your first day back. It's sort of slowly bringing yourself back to bringing up the weight slowly, maybe trying to regain your functioning prior pregnancy, rather than focusing on metrics like what does my body look like or what is my weight. But definitely getting back to pre-functioning is the more important metric, and you'll naturally get back to a more I want to say you'll get back to the physique that you're looking for, your pre-pregnancy physique, if you're getting back to your pre-pregnancy functioning. It will never be exactly the same. It will never be the carbon copy of you in your 20s or whatever. But setting yourself, I want to say, healthy, achievable metrics that's based on what you can do with your body rather than what you look like in the mirror. It's a really important mindset thing as well. Post-pregnancy, there's a lot of shame and there's a lot of mourning, I want to say grief in and around it. And so I think that mindset is really helpful and really important.
Yeah, it's kind of not fair that guys can kind of just go through life and just not have any issue whatsoever. So I just want to add on that, it's that mindset that you have to have a look at. This is me now. I've done this great thing times 2, times 3, times 4, however stupid you are. And then at that point is then realizing that I've done this to my body. How quick can I get it back, but not rushing that process? So I can proudly say that we've had quite a few pregnant ladies through here, coming straight back into quite soon after, like Izzy said, like 6 months. But I want to say, as soon as you feel like you can move quite well again, try start moving, leave all kind of hopes and dreams of like PBs and things like that out the window, and move as much as you can, but obviously within kind of limits. Weights are out the window, things like that. Just move your body. Rocking up to class is actually the best thing, because then your head is in the right space. So just getting here, it can be 6 weeks later, whatever it is, but just coming to the gym, bring your baby to show everybody, let them walk around while you faff around and maybe stretch or do something small like that. That's more important, because that's going to set your mindset right. And as soon as you get that mindset right, wherever you are, even if your kids are like now 6, 10, 12 years old, just get your mindset right into that, so that you can try and one day look back and say, okay, cool, this is how I looked when I was before my 6 kids, and this is how I look after, but my mindset is right, and guaranteed, I'm sure the body will come with that, because now you are an older woman, and you're just trying to chip away at how you want to foresee yourself as an older woman, and also be around someone that's 20 years old. So you're going to come to a class with someone that's in class with us here now that hasn't had kids, that can wear that short and the crop top or whatever it is. And you're like, I can't really rock that anymore. But just be proud that you've done whatever you've done, and you're still here mentally chipping away at that fact that you're here in class with that 20-year-old, 25-year-old that hasn't achieved that, and they can potentially look up to you and be like, wow, that chick's had like 3 kids already, and she's still chipping away at and smashing her workouts and things like that. So I think that's the mindset switch to try and really get into. Yeah. Lindsay, let's hit your question first, because then we'll switch over. Guys, don't forget your questions. Yeah, so Lindsay's gone through quite a long spiel. She's seeing Dr. Miller Smith now at the moment just because it's down the road here at Hills Medical Center, and I'm working in conjunction with him quite nicely. So she's doing some treatment, things like that. Is there any kind of advice that you can give from a woman's side that, like, you might not have used those things or gone through it, but you might know about?
Sure, yeah, it's a very important topic, very important question that you've brought up. I think personally, this is going to be controversial for me to say, but my formal education on PCOS did not do the disease justice. I think, unfortunately, sometimes you get almost, I don't want to say lazy, that's the wrong word, but you get used to seeing a patient, maybe diagnosing or suspecting PCOS, and your answer to it is oral contraceptives. The first question you ask the person is, are you wanting to fall pregnant or are you not wanting to fall pregnant? And if the answer is yes, I want to be pregnant, you refer them to a fertility specialist and they do their own treatment. And if the answer is no, you pop them on an oral contraceptive. And for me, that's not sufficient. It's not enough, right? Because the issues with PCOS, there's very clear hormonal issues in the background with PCOS that can actually be managed quite well with diet and lifestyle, that you don't need to be on a contraceptive tablet unless that's something that you want, that's part of a holistic management plan. So something that's very important in PCOS is managing your insulin. And I think exercise is a fantastic way to do that, making sure that patients are training at varied intensities, including high intensities, is very important in managing your insulin. And then from a diet perspective is also to be looking at managing your insulin. So making sure that when you are, using carbs in your diet wisely, not having a fruit salad altogether for breakfast or for dessert or whatever, but building a balanced diet that manages your blood sugar and manages your insulin in a way that will then benefit and potentially reverse some of the symptoms and side effects of having PCOS. It's something that can be managed with diet and lifestyle to a fair degree, obviously depending on your severity and your phenotype of PCOS, but oral contraceptives is not enough. It can be useful, but you can definitely come off of it and you can have a really enjoyable lifestyle without it. Yeah? Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So definitely be aware of your stress states. So making sure that you're not overtraining. So again, exercise is really important. You want to be maintaining that management of insulin, but to be very careful with your recovery, making sure you're recovering after your workouts so that you're minimizing the negative stress, if I can put it that way, on your body. You want to be making sure that you're not placing excess stress, because overtraining and undernutrition is also going to make your amenorrhea or losing your period worse. It's going to make the chances of it coming back naturally less. So again, focusing on fueling adequately and recovering well after your workouts, not pushing high intensities every single day. It shouldn't be happening every single day. Varying the intensities essentially and focusing on good recovery, good sleep.
All right, let's hit some questions there. So I saw Carelia had a question.
Post what? Sorry?
Post 40s. So
Oh,
the
post
question was,
40s,
so
sorry.
post 40s iron deficiency. What can we try and encourage there? So just I think do your blood panels first. So let's
Yeah.
try get back to the basics, guys. And this is the encouragement that I'm trying to do with the project of Be Nice Guys. We're trying to encourage information. You need to go and get as much information you can. There's two things you can do: is your blood work, and you can go for a D analysis, which I'm digging into a little bit deeper. We're going to have Gavan on in the future and talk about thyroid a little bit more, which is going to be a full topic itself. But try and get all the information that you can, because there's going to be a lot of then like supplementation then after if it is low. And I think there's a varied amount of iron kind of supplementation that you can do thereafter. So take us through the post 40 iron kind of thing. And then I think iron is obviously just in general then through your ages, obviously.
Yeah. So in terms of what blood work you can do the iron studies. So it tests a couple of components because it's not just a plain and simple how much iron is in my blood, but there's also iron transporters that might be an issue, or your iron stores that's then an issue. And so the way that you would then target treat it would be different. Again, I'll come back to my food first philosophy, making sure food first philosophy. Some people either have an underlying issue, meaning that food is not sufficient, and then supplements and specific treatments will need to come in. But that's, again, what Garth was saying. It's very useful to have all the information of what is your iron studies look like. And then having a look at food, because the reality is, with supplementation, especially where iron is concerned, a huge issue is constipation and bioavailability, essentially. So a lot of the iron supplements that you get in the store, A, they're going to make you constipated, and B, you're not actually going to absorb a lot of the iron that's happening. I think the ones that are iron chelates are generally the best tolerated. I think there's a brand
called Gentle Iron. So there's one that's Gentle Iron, which is quite a nice one to use, which I highly recommend. So if you come back with your blood work, but obviously Ben and Gizzy can help with this. So there's one Gentle Iron. But exactly what Gizzy is saying there is that you've got to look at your diet first. So I'm now eating quite a high carnivore diet. So, but she said constipation. I struggle a little bit with my gut. I used to, if I don't have such a high protein diet, if I'm eating protein, so I'm eating meat, I'm eating like a lot of protein. I do skimp a few ways, and I'll teach you guys how to do that, but my gut just doesn't really process. And this is in the Gut Health book, you can try read it. I'll post on the link as well. But you've got to be going to the bathroom very regularly. So I'm not saying like every 6 hours, whatever it is. You need to have a time. My time, all right, personally, I'll share it, is first in the morning I get up. I can't even like brush my teeth or get my coffee in, tea in. And I'm like, Vicky's like, do you want your tea? I'm like, I'll be back now. It's like, so it's like first in the morning, every morning, doom. Since I've been fasting and I've been eating a higher protein diet, that's changed. And I was like, randomly in the evening, I'm like, can you just sort out the kids? I'm going to be back now. And it's like, it's not suiting my timing right. And I'm trying to get that right again. So I'm struggling with my kind of gut timing at the moment because I've played around with so many things lately. I'm like 3-day fast, single day fast, keto, high protein eating, high protein supplementing, and things like that. So you've got to play around with it at the end of the day. So firstly, get your results. Secondly, we're not eating enough protein. And Neil highlights this the whole time. Women don't eat enough. And you've got to make sure that you're eating enough food. And the main thing you'll be eating is protein. But then again, have a look at you individually and have a look at your gut health. And then play around with what can I get in extra. And I use collagen quite nicely. So I just supplement with collagen. I just use more collagen. I'm using about 60 or 70 grams of collagen on an average day now. Yes, I'm getting a little bit lazy, but B, it's just helping with my gut. So now that's finding the regular gut kind of process again. So again, this is a more in-depth question of, you started off like, where's my iron? And it's like, okay, well, you need to look at your diet. And then it's like, okay, well, there's all these other things that are going to happen to try and get your iron right without supplementing. Because now you put a supplement in, are you actually absorbing it? So that was the other question. We're going to have Justin on here about immunology and talking a little bit more about gut health. You're going to put something into, so oral supplementation. I'm a little bit against it. I don't even use that much like zinc and vitamin C and things like that anymore because your gut just destroys it. Rather go for an IV treatment. So go and get those things done IV ready. So this is going to tangent. So you should book a consultation with Gizzy and be like, okay, my question was iron, and it's going to delve into like this massive window of like, okay, cool. If you tested your iron low, this is going to be the pathway to try to fix it, So I think it's an important question, but it's going to be very specific. All of these things are very specific because you want to get the results in as much as you can. So you get the results in, and then that question of iron might actually be out the window because something else is more important. Like she said, you're testing. So with me, Ben and I tested the transport of iron. So I went for DNA analysis. I went for gene testing, and my genes came back that I possibly don't get rid of iron as well as what someone else should be because I haven't got that gene or I've got a mutation on that gene. So that's one of my main markers that I check when I do my blood work. So I make sure that with donating blood and my body actually getting rid of things, I'm still okay. And that's another factor that you want to go have a look at. Is your iron not just low? We're not actually worried about that. It's what Gizzy said is your body actually doing those other things with iron, Yeah. Does that answer the question? So to answer the question, you're going to have to go for the blood work because you might have iron sensitivity as well. So like you might then, so I'm going to recommend that you just eat a very regular diet, eat enough protein for your muscle mass, things like that Gizzo can maybe advise like on those charts. But again, if you have got a gene mutation and you have got then a super low iron deficiency, like you're going to have to test that. Like
I think a very cheap way to test your iron is to donate blood. They will tell you what your iron is. If your actual iron is normal, but you're still having symptoms of the actual iron deficiency, then definitely further testing would be useful, but that can be guided by a doctor. I mean, you can generally check like paleness in your palms or under your eyes or whatever. So there's clinical signs that can also suggest iron deficiency, but the cheapest or literally the cheapest way is to go and donate blood and they'll tell you what your iron is. They also sometimes do full iron studies, especially if you're on the lower side and if you're a woman, they actually do iron studies on your blood and they will phone you if any of the markers are abnormal. I've had many patients who come to me and say, listen, I was phoned by the Western Cape Blood Bank and they said that X or Y or Z was abnormal. So can we then, confirm the results and then where necessary intervene? So if you are a little bit cash strapped, then that's important. But also to look at, and this is something that you can Google. I always recommend Google is a friend and a foe, but when it comes to food sources of stuff, I recommend just having a look at Google. At high quality sources of iron, because I know that diet is very subjective or individualized in what you actually like and what's even available in store. I mean, I can tell you that okra leaf has a high amount of iron, but I mean, where are we going to buy it and who's going to cook it? So definitely your green leafy vegetables is a good place to start. Eggs is also really high in iron. Obviously your animal meat proteins, but certain like pulses and legumes, and if that's something you include in your diet, can also be sources of iron. So finding a variety of sources is maybe then a good idea to make sure that if you're maybe not absorbing it at a high degree from a supplement, or maybe you don't have that much red meat in your diet, or you like to vary, sometimes having fish rather than having, red meat, then you make sure that you're supplementing with other stuff in your diet. You're varying your sources of iron. So it's not just focusing on, I'm having biltong and I'm only having biltong because it's, going to give me iron or whatever, but to vary the diet essentially with different sources of iron as well. And then to also look at something, and again, you can Google it and see if any of them apply to you, is that there's certain things when is that the right word? When eaten.
Yeah,
eaten in combination. Sorry, I'm having an Afrikaans fart here. But anyways, when you eat them in
Gizzy said
combination.
fart on a lady's podcast. I just want to highlight that quickly. That's
It's
amazing.
normal,
Thank you.
guys.
Okay,
It's normal.
okay.
We're talking
We're
about
not going to
gut
go into
health.
the topic of it.
They can actually block the absorption of the other. So I think one of the things that springs to mind is iron and tea don't have it together. But you can also then just have a look at if there's anything that you're eating in combination that's actually blocking the nutrient from being absorbed. So if you want to just hack your own diet, you can just have a look at that stuff, or you're very welcome to DM me. I think they tagged me in today's podcast, but it's Giz Kutsia,
Yeah,
Kutsia with an S. and
so
you
what's
can
super
DM me.
nice with having Gizzy on the podcast, just for like our direct community and things like that, is that Ben is obviously a nice guy to go see. He's got long hair and this and that. When you do go see him, his shirt is off and things like that. So, but if you still don't feel comfortable, all right, please hit up Gizzy and make use of her as your direct contact in, because it's just a nicer conversation, because you can talk about your vagina and all these other things without feeling
And
awkward.
farting.
And you can get through these hard questions. And what I want to try and just help you guys to try and do, which I'm trying to do better, is just try and open up as much as you can, all right? As many questions as you can. Don't feel ashamed to ask a question, especially when it comes to mental health on any of the topics, all right? You can DM me, you can DM Gizzy, you can DM Neil, you can DM Benzo. Neil is a good guy to go to because he was going to give you the honest answer on that topic directly. We might try and just push like the answer down a little bit to make you feel okay and just help your feelings. Me, not so much as well, but then try and see Gizzy or just DM her and go and see her or reach out to her, even if you're not in the country. We have a lot of international clients now, just off the bat like this. I've got a couple of guys from Australia making contact with us, my brother in the UK and a few of his friends. They're starting to watch these things and see like, I can't just go down the road to my GP because I can't ask him the right questions or her the right questions. Step one, I think we said it in the 5 pillars, is that you've got to ask or be able to talk to someone about these things. If it's not your partner, if it's not a family member, you've got to find someone to talk these things about. So I want to try and encourage the open conversation of just saying it how it is, even if you're going to offend someone, or be shy to maybe take offense of it yourself. All right, so try and be like just a little bit more open on those conversations. Yeah. Let's take Rev. Let's have your question there. Okay, so I was trying to highlight the question there. So if you're in your mid-30s, you want to just try and maximize your fertility to try fall pregnant. So this is someone that I just want to dial this back a bit, and I think we'll maybe tackle into a little bit, is that I think women, again, this is now trying to be as open as you can with your body that you're trying to sort out. Firstly, trying to use some kind of something orally or an injection to not fall pregnant, how's that affecting your body? So you as a younger lady, you need to go and see somebody to talk about that first, because you're changing the hormone state of your body. Secondly, then, if you're not using any contraceptive, and you're trying to fall pregnant, how can you maximize it, like what Rev is asking? So maybe take us through just a slightly longer question there of don't take anything. Obviously, you don't want to fall pregnant and you don't want to, by mistake, have a kid, because that's terrible and you're going to hate it for the rest of your life. All right, we all know this. Don't have kids. But then how can, I'm not saying men, and that's a different topic on itself, and I think Benzo, myself, and Neil talk about, men need to actually take a bit more kind of a step forward to letting women live a natural life for longer, especially using then contraceptive. So I think maybe start us off with contraceptive, and then lean into the just answering the question of not using and trying to like fall pregnant and be silly.
Can I just clarify? Are we talking about contraceptives? How can you live better? Or are you talking about how do you come off of contraceptives?
So
for
not using
fertility?
contraceptive.
Okay.
So how that is better for your body.
Oh, okay. I see.
So just
I
to
see,
be,
I see.
so not to use a contraceptive. Obviously,
Okay,
it is
understood.
risky because you could have a baby and fall pregnant and then destroy your life. But how that is better for your body, and for women to not use contraceptive and just tell the men, hey man, like you sort yourself
It's two
out,
to tango.
go for a vasectomy. If you don't want to fall pregnant in a relationship, the guys could also go for a vasectomy and sort themselves out. And I think that is a very big step that men should be doing. I mean, I went immediately after we had Emily, not to not have kids again, but I just felt like Vicky then using a contraceptive is just damaging her body even further, at the risk then of herself. You know, she's already done X, Y, Z. I think men need to step up to the plate and be like, okay, cool, we're not going to have kids. So I'm going to use you and Benzo as a hypothetical thing. You guys haven't had kids yet. Maybe you don't want to have kids. Okay, cool, dude, go for vasectomy. You know, go sort yourself out. You know, like we've discussed this topic, and then you can easily then fall pregnant later on or whatever it is, even not maybe through him, but you can still have kids, you know, whatever it is. So changing your tune 10 years down the line, you know.
Yeah.
So I think, okay, we're going into quite a deep topic now, and we could probably maybe even talk about pregnancy on a full topic by itself.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think let's try to keep both answers short and sweet of let's come off of contraceptive to try fall pregnant and what the best measures there are if you are in your 30s, yeah.
Yeah. So any hormonal contraceptive, you need to give yourself at least 3 to 6 months, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes faster, before you are then able to fall pregnant. It just depends on how quickly your body bounces back to your normal menstrual cycle, because your menstrual cycle is not normal on a hormonal contraceptive. I think it can sometimes be misleading that a contraceptive will mimic a menstrual cycle, but it doesn't, because you're taking a hormone every single day in a specific dose that's meant to try and suppress ovulation. So it's 100% not a normal menstrual cycle. And your body might need time thereafter to sort of get back into your own natural rhythm before you can fall pregnant. Contraceptive is a good topic that I think we can go into on another date. There's many different options of contraceptive. There's non-hormonal contraceptives, and also looking at your partner and your partner's contraceptive is a really important topic that I think we can flesh out a little bit more. But in terms of fertility and maximizing that in terms of nutrition and diet, nutrition and exercise, is a lot of the principles that we have touched on today are very relevant. So looking at your diet, I always say that if you're wanting to fall pregnant, you need to start eating and treating your body as if you are pregnant, if that makes sense. Not necessarily like putting yourself in a glass cage or anything, but looking at your diet and looking at, what do I actually need in my diet? Do I need to be taking this protein shake instead of eating a meal, you know, that's filled with nutrient-dense ingredients, a variety of things? Am I getting all of the micronutrients that I want? Looking at your supplementation, are there things like iron supplementation or folic acid or omega-3? Again, I'm going to go back to how important omega-3 is. Can I be optimizing those, or can I be optimizing it in my diet? Am I getting enough fatty fish in my diet? Those sort of things. So maximizing those micronutrients while you are thinking about falling pregnant, as if you're already pregnant, treating your diet and your lifestyle, limiting alcohol as much as possible. I mean, you're not going to know that you're pregnant until you're maybe like 5 to 8 weeks in, and you might have already had, you know, several weddings and a couple of parties later. So treating alcohol maybe as something that you can avoid or limit, treating caffeine as something as you can maybe avoid and limit, and really just optimizing yourself for pregnancy before you even know that you're pregnant. And then in terms of training, I wanted to actually say this earlier, but
I think just hold your thought on training there. Neil's got a question, and I want to also chip in a thing there.
No, I just want to say that when you're talking about a female doing their part, also guys need to do their part. It's a two-man streak. So things like caffeine also affect the men's sperm count or the strength and that type of thing.
And alcohol. Yeah.
And alcohol. So don't just look at yourself. Tell your partner he's got to do his part too. Like, he needs to have those swimmers strong. He needs to be healthy.
Yeah, and that obviously just makes, like your swimmers are strong. Like, you just want to make sure that if you do want more of your husband's part to be a stronger personality in your kids, then they need to come to the party, you know. And obviously everything's just better with men as well. So try focus on your partner quite a bit. Then I just wanted to say there, so like Izzy said that, like try and treat yourself as you're pregnant. That's probably the best thing you can do, even if you're not trying to fall pregnant. So, I mean, that topic can be just pushed back to like, I'm trying to fuel something else So let me make sure that I'm fueling myself. And I do that when I pack my kids' lunch boxes. So I'm packing my kids' lunch boxes. Would I open that lunch box in my day and eat all those things in there? You know, like you've got to make sure that you're treating yourself first and then again looking at your partner as well. So it's got to be a two-way street on both those things. And you're not going to know that you're pregnant until, so try and watch out for those things. A funny story is that we went away for the one weekend. Vicky and I got horribly drunk and we drank quite a bit of wine with Chris Cooks, and we were at his holiday house. And that week, we found out that she was pregnant. I was like, oh, okay, how much damage have we done? You know, it's like this far along, and we got like horribly drunk. So just be cautious of those things. So try and treat yourself for a while, not just like, oh, I'm trying to fall pregnant this month. You know, make it, like I said, make it quite a monthly thing. So you're coming off a contraceptive. 6 months later, you might only start to find that kind of regulation again. But in that time, both you and your partner treat yourself as like quite a, I don't know, like a sacred time to make sure that you are ticking all those boxes. Alcohol is a massive thing. All right. So Neil touched on it there. It's highly massive. So we've got to try and get alcohol out of our diets because it does so much further damage. I mean, like smoking is a bad one as well. So, I mean, you've got to make sure that you're not around certain toxins and things like that as well. So you've got to make sure that toxins are out of your diet. You've got to make sure that you are supplementing with the right supplements. So I would go for blood work. I would go for other things as well to make sure that you're not using something that your body can't process. So highlighting a few things like that. But alcohol is one of them as well. Yeah. And then talk about the training side of things.
Yeah, so even when you are pregnant, especially newly pregnant, it will change with each trimester. Again, when that progesterone starts coming in and in and in. But anything you could do before you fell pregnant, you are likely to be able to do in your first trimester of pregnancy. So the way that you're training now, if it's something that you're feeling good on your training, you're learning the skills that you want to learn, you're achieving the little goals that you've set for yourself, carry on doing that. You don't necessarily need to be training in a specific way for pregnancy. I would maybe then just add making sure that you're doing a lot of mobility, especially hip and back mobility. That's stuff that gets really taxed in pregnancy. So you might as well prime your body for it now. It's a lot of changes that happens in your body. So maybe just focusing on good mobility, but in terms of training, there isn't really anything that you need to be changing. And even when you're going into first trimester, it depends person to person. Some people have a really hard time in pregnancy, but for the general woman, I wouldn't start any new goals when you become pregnant, as in if I didn't run a marathon before, I wouldn't run a marathon now or train for a marathon now. And the types of movements and your weights and things will obviously start tapering and changing as you go throughout pregnancy. But generally, in your first trimester, you can train the same. So in that aspect, there isn't really anything specific that you need to be doing that will maximize fertility other than the stuff that I've mentioned. Diversifying your training, using a mixture of intensities, keeping it varied.
So I think just one thing there, and I'm going to just reach on to the male side of things as well, is that I've had a very bad back since we had Emily. So James wasn't too bad, but Emily was a constant put to bed like this. And I would say that you've got to make sure that you carry on training. I didn't train through a certain period and things like that, and I'm actually suffering a little bit now from it. Vicky also got a much stronger back and things like that. She doesn't train much at all, and I think she might have struggled with a few back things as well. So I'd say really focus on what you're trying to do. You're trying to then, harvest a baby. You're trying then to a year afterwards be in awkward positions and breastfeed like this and like this and like that or whatever it is and sleep like this. And so try and prepare yourself for, so I wouldn't say like switch to Pilates, but I mean, don't change anything like what Giddy said, but focus maybe just a little bit on your body a little bit differently, but don't make changes. Carry on training. We've got someone pregnant at the box now. At the moment, I just said, carry on doing what you're doing. Don't fall down the stairs. That's the only thing to do.
Just keep it functional.
Yeah, functionally moving
if you're able to squat and hinge and push and pull and do the basics, the foundations of movement, and you can do them well and safely, then
it's actually so nice to see. Like Michelle was training now. I mean, we were doing wall balls late now. I mean, about a week ago, she hit that big 21 wall ball thing times 4 rounds. She's smashing the wall balls out, and it's nice to see. She's got this big fat tummy sitting out. It's just uncomfortable, and she's hating life. She wasn't doing the other part of the workout well. She then jumped onto the bike, so she did the wall balls bike version. I don't know what the other thing was. And it was just cool to see. So it's nice to see women that really take it upon themselves and then they do really well. Some people, like you said, have a bad pregnancy. That's obviously one in a few. But try and really take it upon yourself to not change, because you don't want to have those changes, because that could bring along stresses. It could bring along different, just patterns, and then your pregnancy maybe gets worse because you're now changing things, or maybe you're forced to change things. Yeah.
I think you'll just be happier.
Yeah.
Know what I mean?
No, for sure.
There's no reason to change it until you're getting
have to,
further
yeah.
along and
Yeah.
things are more stretchy. But
Yeah.
it's just keep it simple.
All right, let's go for another question there from Alex. Avia told us that you've got a question.
Mm. Okay. Specifically, so you mean like while you're at the office before training, so that would be essentially around lunchtime. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, shame. Sorry. Yeah. So this is another thing that might be a little bit individualized. So I can give you what I do and I can give you my recommendation, and you can kind of figure out what works for you. So I focus on a solid breakfast, and it usually lasts me quite well into the day. Um, Personally, at the moment, I struggle a little bit with a heavy lunch and then training in the afternoon. I find that I hit quite a slump, especially 2 hours after I've had my lunch, and that would normally be when I would be training, and I hit this afternoon zizz. So I try and keep lunch fairly light, once again focusing on a source of protein, and I keep it a little bit lower in fat than I would breakfast, just because it can feel quite heavy when you're training. It can make you feel a little bit sluggish in your training. It might sound funny because we were talking about how women burn fat or whatever, but in the beginning of your training, you're anyways burning your muscle glycogen, and it's only at about, say, 20 to 40 minutes that you're switching over to fat burning during your workout anyway. So it's not as though you have to be eating fat before your workout to be tapping into fat burning during your workout. So for me personally, I keep lunch fairly light, and then before my training, I'll maybe have a piece of fruit, some dates or a banana or an apple, not immediately before, but maybe within half an hour. And that helps me to feel energized, but also light and, I want to say, perky during my workout. And then afterwards, I would focus again on bringing in the fats, protein again. Protein needs to be at every meal, essentially. I'm not a big snacker. So I usually do 3 meals, and then if I want the fruit before I train, and then your meal after training would include, depending on the training, would include your fat and your protein again, and then carb of choice.
Yeah, so I think a
That
good one
answers
there,
your
and I'm not
question.
going to make excuses of my workout yesterday, but so I didn't plan food yesterday because it's Friday and I normally fast, but I didn't want to do yesterday's workout in a fast. So I had no food yet, so I had 4 pieces of bread, and all I've got is peanut butter. So yesterday, I just had 4 slices of bread with quite a bit of peanut butter. And at about 12 minutes into last night's workout, I had a little bit of an upchuck because there's poor digestion of fats. So you've got to be very careful of fats around training time. All right. So it's not an excuse of why Avia beat me yesterday in yesterday's workout. But like I could feel exactly what Gizzy just said now, that fats is something that you need to be careful with. So stick to it in the morning. So super high fat morning. And then you can even have high fats in the evening, like a little bit later after you've trained and things like that. Again, not directly after you train. You don't want to have a protein shake with fats in it. But an hour later, whatever it is, then tuck into some fats again and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't including like
Yeah.
a post workout meal. Again, I'm not a huge snacker, so I'll do, for me, my recovery drink, which I don't count as a snack, which is essentially just fruit, dextrose, protein, and salt. And then my dinner, I'll then do pretty much protein, fat, and sometimes a carb, just depending on the week and the day. But I vary a lot. in what I do there. I hope that answers your question. But again, some people feel really good training on a full stomach. I don't understand those people.
No, I can't either. No, it's training
It's
on empty
difficult.
stomach.
I'd also be very careful about fasted workouts. Again, it's completely varies person to person. But technically, if you're eating 3 hours before a workout, it's early fasting. So it's an early fasted workout anyways. And sometimes that's also beneficial or preferable in some people. So if you want to have an earlier lunch and then train 3 hours later, if that works for you and you feel good on it, then fantastic. But for me, it's normally about a 2-hour window between lunch and when I train. Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah, I think it's getting right. Guys, so just as normal, please give us comments on the post so that we can actually then answer them. We'll have all of the breakdown as we post it and as we add the topics. But yeah, get hold of Gizzy directly. We'll put her Instagram on. We'll put it, not maybe her home phone number on, but we'll put ways that you can contact. You can contact her through us as well, probably through the portal of Ben as well. So if you don't want to see Ben as your doctor or to come through, we'll just switch them out. They look very similar anyway, so we'll just change them in. And
Same
Neil,
physique.
yeah,
Same
yeah.
physique, yeah.
Neil, do you want to add anything before we close out? Shot.
No, I think women also sometimes just need to learn to love their body more and not just like appreciate what it can do and what it has done, things like that. And don't stress out if certain things are not happening immediately. Like I've seen people who stress out, like, I need to lose this weight before I go on holiday, and they do this thing and they don't get it. Then they go on holiday and lose weight because now they're relaxed and enjoying life. Like, don't put that extra pressure on yourself that things have to happen. If I don't meet this stuff, then I'm failing. Like, enjoy the process of everything. Learn to love your body, and your body's going to work better with you.
Yeah.
I call it an abundance mindset.
Yeah.
So looking at all the things that you can do and all the ways that you are absolutely wonderful and awesome and a badass,
Yeah.
instead of the scarcity mindset, which is I don't have this, or I didn't hit that goal, or I didn't hit that PB or whatever,
Yeah.
but just abundance.
Yeah, so like what Neil says there and what you're saying now is that things are, I think, tougher for women, like especially through the different stages of your life. And I think you've got to just try to take ownership and just accept it as much as you can. Where men are extremely lucky, they can do certain things from young to old, and they don't have these challenges. But again, switching back to mental health as well, is that you've got to be mentally strong through these things, and that's going to be step number one. So try reach out, try communicate, try have a friend, try come see your doctor that you get along with, have a chat. You don't have to visit your doctor when you're sick. So I went this week to go see my other doctor. I saw Miller, and we just actually had a catch up. He's like, is he actually, and I rocked up with my box part. He's like, are you here for that? So I'm like, no, I'm just here for a general checkup, like, so again, go for a conversation with someone that you can conversate with, and have a second doctor. I see Ben often. We hang out more than friends, and obviously with the podcast and a few things, but have a second person that you can actually relate to on other measures. I even spoke to Dr. Miller Smith now, more mental health. He didn't do a physical checkup because I relate with him a little bit better. So I think find someone that you can chat to. Thank you very much for being on our podcast. I'm sure we'll have you around again. We'll dig into those topics I think that we've already discussed on the podcast with Ben and Neil. And we'll go into them specifically. So we'll talk about thyroid, or we'll talk about pregnancy. We'll talk about maybe those things a bit more in detail. But thanks again.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Shoto.
Thank you, Gizzy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Garth.
Thank you.
No, I'm not going to thank Garth. Thanks, Neil.
All right.
Thank you, audience.